The organ music swelled just as a streak of crimson splashed across my chest. In one breath, my white silk turned to red wine. My sister stood there with an empty glass and a smirk. But the real horror was behind her. My parents stood up in the front row and applauded. I did not scream. I leaned close to her ear and whispered, "You just turned this wedding into a trial, and I am the judge. My name is Noelle Ashcroft, and for exactly 34 years, I had believed that if I just made myself small enough, my family would eventually forgive me for the crime of existing, standing there in the humid, filtered light of the historic Savannah Chapel. I thought I had finally escaped that dynamic. I was wrong. The air inside the church was thick with the scent of white magnolias and old beeswax, a heavy, suffocating perfume that usually signaled tradition and sanctity. For me, it was supposed to smell like freedom. I had spent 6 months planning this day down to the second, coordinating every petal and every hymn to ensure absolute perfection, but mostly to ensure that my family had nothing to criticize. I was wearing a dress that cost more than the combined annual income my parents pretended to make. It was a custom silk masterpiece, structurally complex yet visually simple, designed to make me look like the woman I had secretly become rather than the daughter they preferred to pity. The organ music had just swelled to a crescendo, signaling the beginning of the vows. I felt the weight of the silk against my skin, cool and reassuring. Jacob was standing across from me, his eyes anchored on mine. He looked solid. He looked like the only real thing in a world I had built out of smoke and mirrors to survive my childhood. The pastor, a kindly man with a voice like gravel and honey, opened his book. The church was silent. It was that holy silence where even the dust motes seemed to pause in the air. Then I saw the movement in my peripheral vision. It was Kinsley, my younger sister. She was my maid of honor, a title she had demanded rather than earned, claiming that excluding her would break our mother's heart. She stepped forward from the line of bridesmaids. In the script of the wedding, she had no business moving at this moment. She was holding a crystal glass of red wine. Why she had a glass of wine at the altar was a question for later. But in that split second, I knew. I saw the trajectory before it happened. I saw the intention in the tension of her wrist. "Oh!" she cried out. It was a theatrical, hollow sound. The liquid hit me with the force of a physical slap. It did not feel like a splash. It felt like a gunshot. The cold, dark vintage Cabernet slammed into the center of my chest, instantly soaking through the delicate layers of imported silk. It ran down my bodice in jagged, weeping rivers, dripping onto the pristine floorboards of the altar. The shock was absolute. The coldness of the wine made me gasp, a sharp intake of breath that tasted of tannins and betrayal. Time seemed to warp, stretching out into an agonizing slow motion. I looked down at my chest. The stain was monstrous. It looked like a fatal wound, a dark, spreading blossom of violence on the white canvas of my wedding day. I slowly lifted my eyes to look at Kinsley. She was standing right in front of me, the empty glass dangling from her fingers. Her other hand was pressed to her mouth in a gesture of exaggerated horror. "Oh my God, Noelle," she stammered, her voice pitched high enough for the back row to hear. "I am so clumsy. It just slipped. My hand just slipped." But I was close enough to see what the guests could not. I saw the micro-expressions that betrayed the performance. The corners of her eyes were not crinkled in distress. They were relaxed. And then, for a fraction of a second, the hand covering her mouth lowered just an inch, and I saw it. A smirk. It was a small, tight smile of absolute victory. Her eyes locked with mine, and they were glittering with a challenge. "I did this," her eyes said. "I ruined your moment. I took your perfect white dress and I made it trash. What are you going to do about it?" The silence in the church was deafening. It was heavier than the silence before the vows. This was the silence of 300 people holding their breath, witnessing a disaster. It was the kind of awkward, paralyzing tension that makes people want to look away. And then the applause started. It began with a single clap, sharp and rhythmic, then another, then a pair of hands joining in. I froze. My brain could not process the sound. Who applauds a disaster? Who claps for a ruined bride? I turned my head slowly toward the front row. My parents, Ruth and Gordon, were standing up. They were not rushing forward to help me. They were not looking for napkins or shouting at Kinsley for her carelessness. They were standing tall, their chins lifted, clapping their hands with a vigorous, rhythmic enthusiasm. My father was nodding, a look of satisfied approval on his face, as if he had just watched a golfer sink a difficult putt. My mother was smiling, that tight, toxic smile she reserved for moments when she felt she had successfully put me in my place. They were applauding the humiliation of their own daughter. The sound of their clapping echoed off the high, vaulted ceilings, grotesque and unnatural. It was a signal to everyone in the room. They were saying, "This is correct. This is what she deserves. Look how we discipline her even now. Look how we remind her that she is nothing without our approval." The guests were paralyzed. I could feel their confusion radiating from the pews. They did not know what to do. Was this a skit? Was this some strange family tradition? Or were they witnessing abuse in real time beside me? Jacob moved. I felt the air shift as his posture changed from shock to aggressive defense. He dropped my hand and took a step toward Kinsley. His jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping beneath the skin. He was going to shout. He was going to cause a scene. He was going to do exactly what a loving partner does when they see the person they love being attacked. But I knew my family better than he did. If Jacob shouted, he became the aggressor. If he yelled, they would play the victims. They would say he was unstable, that he ruined the wedding with his temper, that poor Kinsley made a simple mistake and he attacked her. They would rewrite the narrative before the wine even dried. I reached out and grabbed Jacob's wrist. My grip was iron. I dug my nails into his skin, hard enough to hurt, hard enough to snap him out of his red haze. "Don't," I said. My voice was low, barely a breath, but it commanded him. I looked him in the eyes. "Do not give them that." Jacob looked at me, his eyes wild with confusion and rage, but he stopped. He saw something in my face that he had never seen before. He saw the transition from Noelle the fiancée to Noelle the CEO, the woman who ran a logistics empire from the shadows. He stepped back, though his body was still vibrating with tension. I turned back to Kinsley. She was still holding the pose of the distraught sister, waiting for me to cry. She wanted me to run. She wanted the image of me fleeing the altar in tears, the wedding over, the money wasted, the day destroyed. She wanted to be the one who comforted our parents while they sighed about how unstable and dramatic Noelle was. I took a step toward her. I invaded her personal space, closing the distance until I could smell the expensive perfume I had bought for her as a bridesmaid gift. I leaned in close, past the barrier of the empty wine glass, until my lips were almost brushing her ear. I kept my face perfectly smooth. I did not frown. I did not cry. I made my expression as blank and cold as a marble statue. "You just turned this wedding into a trial," I whispered, my voice steady and devoid of any tremor. "And I am the judge." Kinsley flinched. The smile vanished from her eyes. She pulled back slightly, looking at me with genuine confusion. She had expected screaming. She had expected tears. She had not expected ice. I stepped back from her. Creating distance, I looked out at the congregation. In the sea of faces, I saw the glint of lenses. Dozens of phones were held aloft. People were recording. Of course they were. In the age of content, a wedding disaster is viral gold. A sister spilling wine on a bride is 1 million views on TikTok by tomorrow morning. My first instinct was horror. This humiliation would be broadcast to the world. But then, my mind shifted gears. I analyzed the angles. They were recording Kinsley holding the glass. They were recording my parents standing and clapping while I stood there soaked in red. They were recording my silence. This was not just humiliation. This was evidence. If I ran, the video would be titled Bridezilla Meltdown. If I stayed, if I stood my ground, the video would be something else entirely. It would be a documentation of cruelty. It was a double-edged sword, and I decided right then and there to grab it by the hilt, even if it cut my hands. I turned my back on Kinsley. I turned my back on my clapping parents, who were slowly sitting down now that the initial shock value had worn off. Looking around with smug satisfaction, I faced the pastor. He was staring at me, his mouth slightly open, his Bible lowered. He looked from me to the stain, then to the door, expecting me to call a recess. "Continue," I said. The word cut through the murmurs of the crowd like a knife. The pastor blinked. "Miss Ashcroft, perhaps we should pause to let you get cleaned up." "No," I said. My voice was loud enough for the first 10 rows to hear. "We will not pause. My sister has made her contribution to the ceremony. Now we will continue with the rest of it." I stood tall. I could feel the wine soaking through to my undergarments. It was sticky and cold, clinging to my skin. I could feel the wet, heavy fabric dragging at the front of the dress, distorting its perfect silhouette. I did not try to wipe it. I did not try to cover it with my bouquet. I let it be. I let the stain scream. I reached out and took Jacob's hands again. They were warm, a stark contrast to the cold liquid on my chest. He squeezed my fingers, hard. It was a squeeze of solidarity, but also of awe. He stayed right there with me. He did not look at the stain. He looked at my face. "Dearly beloved," the pastor began again, his voice shaking slightly before finding its rhythm. I stood there for 20 minutes. I stood there while the wine oxidized, turning from a bright red to a deep, bruised purple. I stood there while the smell of alcohol wafted up, mixing with the magnolias, creating a sickening sweet scent of decay. I felt the eyes of 300 people boring into my back. I knew what they were whispering. I knew they were pitying me. But as I stood there, reciting the vows I had written, promises of loyalty and protection, I felt something inside me harden. The part of me that had always sought my parents' approval, the little girl who just wanted to be good enough, died in that church. She drowned in that Cabernet. Kinsley shifted uncomfortably behind me. I could hear her breathing. She was waiting for the explosion that never came. The lack of reaction was driving her mad. She didn't know that I wasn't reacting because I was already planning. I was calculating net worths. I was mentally reviewing the clauses in the loans I had secretly bought. I was structuring the timeline of their destruction. When the ceremony ended, we did not walk back down the aisle to joyous cheers. The applause was scattered, hesitant. People were too uncomfortable to cheer properly. Jacob and I walked past my parents' pew. I did not look at them. I stared straight ahead at the open doors of the church, where the bright Savannah sun was waiting. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw the stain on my dress reflected in the glass partition of the vestibule. It was massive. It covered my heart and my stomach, a jagged, ugly map of my family's dysfunction. It was no longer just a stain. It was a wax seal on a document of war. They thought they had marked me as a victim. They were wrong. They had marked themselves as targets. As I stepped out into the blinding light, leaving the gloom of the church behind, I didn't feel shame anymore. I felt the cold, clear clarity of a woman who has finally been given permission to stop being nice. The war had started, and I was the only one who knew that the first shot had been fatal. Not for me, but for them, to understand why I stood so still while red wine dripped down my dress. You have to understand the life I had been living for the 18 months leading up to that moment. It was a life built on a meticulously crafted architecture of silence and deception. For nearly 2 years, I smelled permanently of industrial-grade isopropyl alcohol and cheap synthetic lemon floor cleaner. It was a scent that clung to my hair, my skin, and the fibers of the oversized, shapeless scrubs I wore to every family gathering, to my parents and my sister. That smell was the olfactory signature of failure. To me, it was armor. I had curated a version of Noelle Ashcroft that was palatable to the Ashcroft family dynamic. This version of me worked the graveyard shift at a place called Sterling Bay Facilities. In the narrative I fed them, Sterling Bay was a grim, soul-sucking janitorial contractor where I spent my nights mopping biohazard floors and wiping down stainless steel counters for minimum wage, plus a pitiful shift differential. I told them stories about my aching back and the rude supervisors who docked my pay for being 2 minutes late. I complained about the cost of gas and the price of eggs. I watched my mother's eyes glaze over with a mix of boredom and performative pity every time I mentioned my car needing new tires. They loved that version of me. They loved her because she was safe. She was needy. She was beneath them. The reality, however, was playing out in a sterile, temperature-controlled command center 10 miles away from the janitor's closet they imagined I occupied. Sterling Bay facilities did not exist. I was the founder and sole owner of Nightfall Sterile Logistics. I did not mop floors. I moved human organs, rare blood phenotypes, and experimental mRNA vaccines across state lines in under 4 hours. My company specialized in the last mile of the medical cold chain, the most critical. High-stakes segment of pharmaceutical transport, where a single degree of temperature fluctuation could ruin $3 million worth of oncology drugs. I had a fleet of 20 refrigerated Sprinter vans and a team of drivers who were vetted more thoroughly than Secret Service agents. My nights were not spent scrubbing toilets. They were spent staring at 3 wall-mounted monitors, tracking GPS dots moving through the arteries of the American South, ensuring that a kidney meant for a pediatric transplant in Atlanta did not get stuck in traffic on I-16. I negotiated contracts with hospital administrators who terrified their own staff, but who took my calls on the first ring because they knew I was the only one who could guarantee a zero-fail delivery rate during a hurricane. But my family could never know this. I had learned early on that in the Ashcroft household, success was a zero-sum game. If I won, Kinsley lost. If I was strong, my mother felt unneeded. If I had money, my father felt emasculated unless he was controlling how I spent it. So, I hid the empire I built behind a shell company called Tidewater Holdings. My name appeared on no public websites. My LinkedIn profile was non-existent. If you Googled Noelle Ashcroft, you found a scant digital footprint that suggested a woman who barely existed in the modern world. All the assets, the fleet, the insurance policies, and the payroll were routed through Tidewater. I lived a double life that required the discipline of a deep-cover operative. I maintained a decoy apartment in a crumbling complex off Abercorn Street. It was a second-floor walk-up with beige carpets that smelled of damp dog fur and thin walls that let me hear my neighbor's television schedule in high fidelity. The rent was $900 a month. I kept it sparsely furnished with IKEA pieces I bought secondhand, and I made sure the fridge was always stocked with store-brand soda and wilting vegetables. This was where I invited my parents for coffee once a month. I watched them look around the cramped living room with grim satisfaction, my father noting the peeling paint on the windowsill as proof that I needed his advice on how to manage my non-existent finances. My real home was a 3-story townhouse in the historic district. 3 blocks from the river, it had original heart pine floors, exposed brick walls that stayed cool in the Savannah summer, and a kitchen with a 6-burner wolf range that I rarely had time to use. It was a sanctuary of silence and high thread count sheets. I parked my Audi Q8 in a private garage 3 streets away and drove a dented, 10-year-old Honda Civic to see my family. The transition was physical and psychological. Before visiting my parents, I would drive to the decoy apartment, change out of my tailored blazer and silk blouse, and pull on the faded scrubs. I would tie my hair back in a messy bun, scrub off my makeup, and apply a dab of the lemon sanitizer to my wrists like perfume. I had to lower my shoulders, affect a posture of chronic exhaustion, and dull the sharpness in my eyes. I had to become the Noelle they expected the gray, shapeless background character in the vibrant movie of their lives. And the star of that movie was always Kinsley, who described herself as a lifestyle creator. In the 21st century economy, this meant she was professional at pretending to be wealthy while drowning in bad debt. She was 26 years old and lived her entire life through the lens of a ring light. Kinsley's career was a fascinating study in smoke. She had 40,000 followers on Instagram, a number she had artificially inflated by purchasing bot accounts from a click farm in Eastern Europe. She posted unboxing videos of luxury handbags that she would return the next day, carefully hiding the tags inside the lining while she filmed. She tagged brands that had never heard of her, thanking them for partnerships that existed only in her head. I watched this charade with the detached eye of a logistics expert. I knew the math didn't work. I knew the lease on her white Range Rover was predatory, likely carrying an interest rate of over 12% because her credit score was in the low 500s. I knew the business trips she took to Miami were funded by maxing out credit cards that my parents would eventually pay off by refinancing their house for the third time. Sunday dinners were the theater where this dynamic played out most vividly. We would sit around the mahogany table that my mother polished obsessively, eating roast chicken that was always slightly too dry. Kinsley would dominate the conversation, talking about her engagement metrics and the stress of being a public figure. "It is just so exhausting," she would sigh, picking at her food. "My DMs are blowing up. Everyone wants a piece of me. I have a brand deal with a detox tea company pending, and the contract is just a nightmare to read." My father, Gordon, would nod solemnly. "You have to be careful, Kinsley. You are a brand. You have to protect your intellectual property." Then, inevitably, the spotlight would turn to me, not to shine, but to dim. "How is the cleaning business, Noel?" my father would ask, his voice dropping an octave, adopting the tone one uses for a sick pet. "Still working those nights?" "Yes, Dad," I would say, keeping my eyes on my plate. "It is steady. The shift differential helps with the electric bill." "Well, it is honest work," my mother, Ruth, would chime in, patting my hand. "Not everyone is cut out for the creative industry like Kinsley. Some people are just support staff. And that is okay, honey. We need people to clean up the messes." The irony was acidic. I was literally managing the supply chain for regional trauma centers, while Kinsley was managing the comments section on a photo of a latte. But I swallowed the comment. I let them have it. I let them have it because I knew the alternative. If they knew I was the CEO of Nightfall, the dynamic would not shift to respect. It would shift to predation. They would not be proud. They would be hungry. My father would want a seat on the board. My mother would want a monthly stipend to maintain the family image. Kinsley would demand I fund her lifestyle as an investment in her brand. They would drain me dry, not just financially, but spiritually. They did not want me to be powerful. They wanted me to be useful. And as the poor daughter, I was useful in a very specific way. I was the baseline. I was the control group. No matter how much money Kinsley wasted, no matter how reckless my parents were with their retirement funds, they could always look at me in my scrubs and think, "At least we are doing better than Noel." I provided them with a sense of superiority that was more valuable to them than actual cash, but I was also their emergency fund because they thought I was poor. They never asked me for large sums. They asked for $50 here, $100 there. "To help with groceries," my mother would whisper, pressing a crumpled list into my hand. Or my father would say, "I am a little short on cash for the lawn guy. Do you have $20? I always gave it to them. I pulled crumpled bills out of a Velcro wallet I kept specifically for these interactions. I let them see me hesitate, let them think I was sacrificing my lunch money. It made them feel benevolent when they didn't pay me back. It reinforced the hierarchy. The only person who saw through the fog was Jacob. I met Jacob Marlowe at a logistics conference in Charleston. One of the few times I allowed myself to step out of the shadows under my real identity. He was a maritime lawyer, specializing in international shipping disputes. He was calm, pragmatic, and possessed a quiet intelligence that didn't need to announce itself. When we started dating, I tried to keep the walls up. I didn't let him see the decoy apartment, but I didn't bring him to the townhouse immediately either. I met him in neutral territory, but Jacob was a man who read contracts for a living. He noticed details. He noticed that my shoes were Italian leather, even if I wore simple jeans. He noticed that when a waiter dropped a tray, I didn't flinch. but immediately calculated the most efficient path to clean it up. 6 months in, he confronted me, not with anger, but with curiosity. We were sitting on a bench in Forsyth Park. He turned to me and said, "You are not a janitor, Noelle. You speak 3 languages. You understand supply chain economics better than the keynote speaker at that conference. And you have 2 phones, one of which you never answer when you are with me, but you check it every 4 minutes with the look of a general monitoring a battlefield. Who are you?" I told him. I took him to the townhouse. I took him to the warehouse where my vans were being loaded with cooler boxes marked human blood. Rush. I showed him the ledgers of Nightfall Sterile Logistics. I expected him to be angry that I had lied. Instead, he looked at the operation. Then he looked at me, and he asked the question that would become the bedrock of our relationship. "You built all this," he said, gesturing to the warehouse. "And you still let them treat you like a servant. Why?" "Because if they know," I said, "they will destroy it. They will eat it alive." Jacob looked at me with a sadness that terrified me. "Noelle," he said softly, "do you think they love you? Or do they love the fact that they can control you?" I didn't have an answer then. I told myself that their love was just complicated. I told myself that by hiding my success, I was protecting the family unit. I was keeping the peace. But as the wedding approached, the cracks in my double life began to widen. The pressure of maintaining the lie while planning a high society event was immense. My parents assumed Jacob was paying for everything, or that his family was. They treated him like a wallet attached to a man. They treated me like the lucky girl who had snagged a provider, lifting me out of my janitorial misery. I let them believe it. I let them believe Jacob was the savior. It was easier than explaining that the Black American Express card in my wallet had my name on it, not his. But Jacob's question haunted me. Do they love you? Or the control I began to test them, in small ways. I would mention a fictional promotion at Sterling Bay, saying I might become a shift supervisor. Instead of being happy, Kinsley made a face. "Ew," she said. "Does that mean you have to touch the trash yourself?" My mother sighed. "Don't get your hopes up, Noelle. Management is a lot of pressure. You know you get overwhelmed easily." They didn't want me to rise. They wanted me to stay right where I was on my knees, scrubbing the floor, looking up at them. Jacob became my anchor in reality. He was the only person who knew both Noelles. He watched the performance during Sunday dinners, his hand resting on my knee under the table, a silent signal of support. He saw the way I shrank when my father spoke. He saw the way I flinched when Kinsley made her passive-aggressive jokes about my polyester wardrobe. "You are playing a dangerous game," Jacob told me one night. 2 months before the wedding, we were on the balcony of the townhouse, looking out over the Savannah River. "You are handing them a loaded gun and hoping they don't pull the trigger. Eventually, Noelle, the mask has to come off. And when it does, they are going to hate you for it, not because you lied, but because you succeeded without their permission." I didn't want to believe him. I wanted to believe that somewhere, under the layers of narcissism and greed, they were still my family. I wanted to believe that if I could just get through the wedding, if I could just give them this one day where I was the center of attention, they would grant me a moment of grace. I was naive. I was a CEO who could route a liver transplant through a thunderstorm. But I couldn't see the storm brewing at my own kitchen table. The dichotomy of my life was exhausting. By day, I was commanding a logistics network that kept people alive. By night, I was sitting on a stained couch in a fake apartment, listening to my sister complain that her engagement ring, which didn't exist yet, had to be at least 2 carats, or she would say no. I was living in a pressure cooker, and as I stood at the altar, looking at the red stains spreading across my chest, I realized that Jacob had been right all along. The double life hadn't protected me. It had only delayed the inevitable collision. My parents didn't just want me weak. They needed me broken. And since I hadn't broken myself for them, Kinsley had decided to do it for me. The irony was that in their attempt to break the janitor, they had woken up the CEO. They thought they were humiliating a woman who scrubbed toilets. They didn't know they were declaring war on an entity with the resources to buy their debt, foreclose on their home, and dismantle their lives with the same clinical efficiency I used to transport vaccines. They had spilled wine on the wrong sister. They had spilled it on the one who knew how to clean up a mess by removing the source of the contamination entirely. The Sunday dinners were not meals. They were performance art pieces of systematic degradation, held weekly at 6 o'clock sharp in my parents' dining room. The room itself was a testament to their financial delusion. Filled with heavy, dark furniture that looked expensive from a distance but was chipping at the corners, much like their reputation in the neighborhood. I usually arrived exactly 3 minutes late. This was a calculated error. It gave them time to be seated and waiting, so that when I walked in, I was immediately the disruption, the problem to be solved. "There she is," Kinsley would announce, not looking up from her phone. "I can smell the bleach from here." She would perform a little pantomime, wrinkling her perfectly contoured nose and waving a hand in front of her face. It was her favorite opening act. She wanted to remind everyone, before a single bite was eaten, that I was the contamination in their sterile, aesthetic world. "It is disinfectant. Kinsley," I would say, keeping my voice low and submissive. "I had a spill to clean up right before shift change." "Well, maybe scrub harder in the shower next time," she would sneer, finally looking at me with eyes that assessed my outfit, faded jeans and a generic gray sweater with undisguised contempt. "You smell like a public restroom," my mother, Ruth, would sigh, a sound that carried the weight of 1,000 disappointments. "Be nice, Kinsley. Noelle is doing her best with the limitations she has." That was the phrase, limitations. It was the cornerstone of their mythology about me. In their minds, I was intellectually and socially limited, a creature of simple needs and simple capabilities. They needed to believe this, because the alternative that I was capable but chose not to help them become rich was terrifying to them. We would sit. The food was usually something that required effort to ruin, like a pot roast that had been cooked until it surrendered all moisture, served on the good china that we were terrified to chip. My father, Gordon, presided over the table like a benevolent dictator of a failing state. He had a routine. He would ask Kinsley about her week, listening with rapt attention as she detailed the stress of filming 3 TikTok videos and returning a pair of shoes she had already worn. He would nod, offering sagely advice about brand management and scaling her vertical, using buzzwords he had heard on television but clearly did not understand. Then, he would turn to me. The warmth would leave his face, replaced by a cold transactional expectancy. "And how is the mop and bucket brigade?" he would ask. He thought this was witty. He had used the same joke for 4 years. "Fine, Dad," I would reply. "Work is work." "It is good that you are working," he would say, leaning back, his eyes drifting inevitably to the purse I had placed on the floor. "You know, in this economy, everyone has to contribute. We are a team. Noelle, a family is a team. The strong carry the weak, but the weak still have to pull the cart." This was the cue. It was a scripted moment that made my stomach turn, not from nervousness, but from the sheer audacity of it. "I know, Dad," I would say. I would reach down and pick up my purse. It was a cheap, faux leather bag I had bought specifically for these dinners. Inside, I kept a Velcro wallet. I made sure to rip the Velcro open loudly. The sound was sharp and childish, a sonic marker of my supposed poverty. I would pull out a small stack of bills. I always prepared them beforehand. I crumpled them, folded the corners, and sometimes even rubbed them with a little dirt to make them look like they had been earned through hard physical labor. "I have $40, I would say, placing the sad little pile of cash on the table next to the salt shaker. "I picked up an extra half shift on Tuesday." My father would look at the money. He would not say thank you. He would look at it with a mixture of greed and disappointment, calculating quickly that $40 would barely cover the wine he was currently drinking. But he would take it. His hand would shoot out, snatching the bills with a speed that belied his age. Every bit helps, he would mutter, stuffing the money into his shirt pocket without counting it in front of me, though I knew he would count it the second I left. We have the water bill coming up. Costs are skyrocketing. This was the signal for my mother to enter the stage. Ruth Ashcroft was a woman who could cry on command, a skill she used to evade accountability the way a squid uses ink. She would dab at her dry eyes with a linen napkin. "Oh, the bills," she would whimper. "You have no idea. Noelle." The property tax assessment came in. They are trying to bleed us dry. And the insurance on the house, it has gone up 20%. We are drowning here. Just drowning. She would look at me with pleading eyes, waiting for me to offer more, waiting for me to say I had a savings account I could raid. But I knew the truth. I knew because I had the notifications on my phone set to silent, just 2 hours before this dinner, while she was supposedly weeping over the water bill. Ruth had posted a photo on Facebook. It was a picture of her new manicure gel tips with gold foil accents, costing at least $80, and a shopping bag from a boutique in the district that sold silk scarves for $200 apiece. The caption read, "Treating myself because self-care is mandatory." I sat there, looking at her theatrical tears, and I visualized the receipt for the scarf. I visualized the credit card statement that I knew was sitting unopened on the hallway table. Accruing interest at 24%. "I am sorry, Mom," I would say, keeping my voice flat. "I wish I could help more, but the rent at my place went up too." "Well, you just have to budget better," she would snap, the tears instantly evaporating as her tone shifted to criticism. "If you didn't buy those, what are those? Generic sodas. You could save $5 a week. It adds up, Noelle. You have to be smarter." I would nod. "Yes, Mom." Jacob usually sat next to me during these ordeals. The first few times he joined us. He had been visibly confused. He had looked from my father's greedy hands to the crumpled bills, then to my face, waiting for me to reveal the joke. When he realized there was no joke, he became quiet. But over time, his silence changed quality. It went from confused to observant. He stopped trying to make conversation with Kinsley about her career after she asked him if maritime law was like being a pirate lawyer. Instead, he watched them. He watched the way Kinsley kicked me under the table and then giggled when I flinched. He watched the way my mother would serve Kinsley the choicest cut of meat and give me the piece that was mostly gristle. He watched the way my father would interrupt me every time I tried to speak, talking over me as if I were a radio playing in the background that he wanted to turn off. One night, after a particularly brutal dinner where Kinsley had spent 20 minutes making fun of my frizzy hair, which was actually just tied back to hide a blowout that cost $300, Jacob drove us away in his car. The silence in the car was heavy. We were 3 blocks away before he spoke. "They do not just take your money," he said, his voice tight. "They feed on your submission. It is like a fuel source for them." "I know," I said, looking out the window at the passing streetlights. "Why do you keep the receipts?" he asked. I turned to look at him. "What?" "I saw you," he said. "When your dad went to the bathroom, you took a picture of the venomous text message your mom sent you last week about the Christmas gifts. You screenshotted it and sent it somewhere. You do it all the time." I let out a long breath. "I call it the archive." It was true. I did not just endure the abuse. I cataloged it. I had set up a secure server on the Nightfall system, buried under layers of encryption usually reserved for pharmaceutical trade secrets. I called the folder Project Bloodline. Every time my mother sent a text saying, "If you do not bring cash for the electric bill, do not bother coming for Thanksgiving. We do not need another mouth to feed." I screenshotted it. Every time my father left a voicemail guilting me about paying back the cost of raising me, I saved the audio file. Every time Kinsley posted a video mocking people who work 9-to-5 jobs while wearing a sweater I knew she had stolen from my closet 3 years ago, I downloaded it. I had thousands of files. It was a taxonomy of manipulation. I had emails where they threatened to disown me. I had letters where they forged my signature on permission slips for Kinsley when we were younger. But the most damning evidence was financial. Because I ran a logistics company, I knew how to track assets. I knew how to find public records. I knew that Kinsley was not just broke. She was legally insolvent. I knew that the white Range Rover she drove was not hers. It was leased under a predatory subprime auto lender that targeted people with bad credit. She was 3 months behind on payments. I had seen the digital notices in the public repo databases that my company used to vet drivers. The repo order was active. Every time she drove that car to a chute, she was risking having it hooked and towed. I knew she had 5 credit cards maxed out to the limit, and she was rotating balance transfers to keep the minimum payments afloat. She was playing a shell game with debt. Moving money she didn't have to cover holes she kept digging. Yet, she sat there at the table, sipping wine she didn't pay for, looking at me with absolute, unshakable superiority. "You should really look into getting a second job. Noelle," she said to me during one of the last dinners before the wedding. She was picking at a hangnail, bored. "Maybe Uber Eats you have that old car. Might as well put it to use. I need a new lighting kit for my studio. And Dad says things are tight." "I will think about it," I said. "Don't think too long," Gordon grunted. "Opportunity waits for no one, and Kinsley's career is at a tipping point. We all need to support the winner in the family." The winner. That word echoed in my head. I looked at Kinsley. She was 26, drowning in debt, with no marketable skills and a personality that repelled anyone who wasn't related to her. I looked at myself. I was 34, the owner of a multi-million-dollar logistics firm, holding the deed to my own home, with a diversified portfolio and a fiancé who respected me. But in this room, in this twisted ecosystem, she was the winner and I was the loser. They had written the script, cast the roles, and refused to let me audition for anything else. That was when I realized the truth. The realization was cold and heavy, settling in my chest like a stone. I wasn't angry about the wine incident that would happen in the future. I wasn't angry about the insults or the lost $40 here and there. I was angry because they had stolen my history. They had looked at me for 3 decades and decided that I was nothing. They had erased my potential before I even had a chance to show it. They didn't hate me because I was bad. They hated me because they needed someone to be below them so they could feel tall. I was their footstool. "You know," I said, breaking my silence at that dinner, "I heard that repo companies are very active in Savannah lately. They have these new license plate scanners." Kinsley froze. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. For a second, the mask slipped, and I saw the sheer terror in her eyes. She knew. She knew that I might know. "What do you know about it?" she snapped, her voice shrill. "Stick to mopping floors, Noelle." "Just making conversation," I said, taking a sip of water. "Just contributing." I saw Jacob hide a smile behind his napkin. That night, when I uploaded the recording of that dinner to the archive, I created a new subfolder. I named it The Wedding. I knew something was coming. I didn't know exactly what they would do, but I knew the pressure was building. Kinsley was desperate for money and attention. My parents were desperate to maintain their facade, and I was the convenient target for all of it. I looked at the folder on my screen. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was ammunition. I wasn't gathering this to prove to them that I was good. I was gathering it to prove to the world that they were monsters. "You are not going to save them, are you?" Jacob asked me later, watching me stare at the screen. "No," I said. "I am going to let them happen." I closed the laptop. The fan whirred into silence. My sister spilled wine on my dress because she thought I was weak. She thought I was the Noelle who handed over $40 and apologized for existing. She didn't know that she was spilling wine on the narrator of her downfall. She didn't know that for 18 months. I hadn't just been cleaning up messes. I had been keeping the receipts. And now, the bill was coming due. The ambush happened exactly 3 months before the wedding. It was a Tuesday, a day I usually reserved for quarterly budget reviews at nightfall. But my mother had called 3 times in an hour, her voice pitching up with that frantic urgency she reserved for manufactured crises. She said we needed to discuss logistics. I found the word choice ironic, considering that was my actual profession, though she still believed I was an expert in mop buckets. When Jacob and I arrived at my parents' house, the dining table was already set for a negotiation. There were no plates, just a single notepad in front of my father and a calculator that looked like it was from the 1990s. Kinsley was there too, lounging on the sofa with her phone, scrolling through Instagram with the intense focus of a surgeon, or perhaps a sniper. "Sit down," Gordon said. It was not an invitation, it was a directive. We sat. Jacob kept his posture relaxed, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. He hated these summits. He called them hostage negotiations with worse snacks. "We have been looking at the numbers," my father began, tapping the notepad with a pen. "This venue you have picked, the hotel in the historic district, it is excessive." "It is booked, Dad," I said calmly. "The deposit is paid." "Deposits can be forfeited," my mother interjected, leaning forward. Her eyes were bright with a plan. We were thinking, why waste all that money on a hotel ballroom when we have a perfectly good backyard? I looked at the perfectly good backyard through the sliding glass door. It was a patch of dying St. Augustine grass, bordered by a fence that was leaning precariously to the left, and dominated by an above-ground pool that had been empty and covered with a green tarp for 3 years. It looked like a crime scene waiting for the yellow tape. "You want me to get married next to the algae pit?" I asked. "We would clean it up," Ruth insisted. "We could get a tent, fairy lights. It would be rustic, authentic, and think of the savings. Noelle, $30,000. Do you know what that kind of money could do for this family?" "Specifically," Gordon interrupted, clearing his throat. "We were thinking that the savings could be reallocated. Kinsley is in a transitional period with her brand. She needs to pivot. There is a rebranding strategy that requires some capital injection, new equipment, a new vehicle lease to match the aesthetic. The Range Rover is becoming a liability." I felt Jacob stiffen beside me. "Let me get this straight," he said, his voice deceptively mild. "You want us to cancel our wedding venue, lose the deposit, and move the ceremony to your backyard so that you can use the money we saved to lease a new car for Kinsley." "It is not just a car," Kinsley piped up from the sofa, not even looking up. "It is a mobile content studio, and it is a G-Wagon. By the way, Range Rovers are so 2024. It is an investment in the family business," Gordon said, slamming his hand on the table as if closing a deal. "Noelle, be reasonable. You are a janitor. Do you really need crystal chandeliers and waiters in tuxedos? It feels pretentious. People will talk. They will say you are trying to be something you are not." "And what am I?" "Dad," I asked. "You are practical," he said, searching for a word that wouldn't sound like an insult but failing. "You are salt of the earth. A backyard barbecue fits you. It fits your station." Jacob stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "No," he said. The word hung in the air, absolute and final. "Excuse me?" My mother gasped, clutching her pearls as if he had slapped her. "The wedding is not a fundraiser for Kinsley's imaginary career," Jacob said, his voice cold and hard. "The venue stays, the budget stays, and not a single dime of our money is going toward a G-Wagon or a rebrand or whatever scheme is next. This is Noelle's day, not Kinsley's content opportunity." The silence that followed was thick with shock. They were not used to being told no. They were used to me folding, to me offering a compromise. "Well," my mother said, her face twisting into a sneer, "I guess we know who wears the pants. I didn't know you were so controlled by him. Noelle, I thought you had your own mind." "I do," I said, standing up to join Jacob, "and my mind says we are keeping the hotel." My father threw the pen down. "Fine, waste your money, but do not come crying to us when you are eating ramen noodles in that little apartment of yours because you wanted to play princess for a day. God, it is embarrassing. A cleaning lady in a ball gown. It is like putting lipstick on a pig." I flinched. I couldn't help it. The insult was so crude. So direct. Dad, Kinsley laughed from the couch. Don't be mean. Pigs are smart. Noelle is just aspirational. We left, but the war had shifted fronts. They knew they couldn't get the money directly, so they decided to extract payment in pain. 2 weeks later, the battlefield moved to the bridal boutique. I had foolishly agreed to let Kinsley and my mother come to the final fitting. I told myself it was for tradition. I told myself that maybe, seeing me in the dress, they would feel something other than contempt. The boutique was one of the most exclusive in Atlanta. I had booked a private appointment, using my Tidewater Holdings assistant to set it up so my name wouldn't trigger any recognition until I arrived. When I walked out of the dressing room, the silence was heavy. The dress was a masterpiece of architectural silk, sleek and modern, with a back that plunged dangerously low. It made me look tall, statuesque, powerful. It was not a dress for a practical girl. It was a dress for a queen. I looked at my mother in the mirror. She was frowning. "It is a bit much, isn't it?" she said, tilting her head. "I mean, for you. It looks like it is wearing you." "I think it is beautiful," I said quietly. Kinsley stood up, walking around me in a circle, sipping the complimentary champagne the boutique provided. She stopped behind me, looking at my reflection with eyes that were cold and calculating. "White is a bold choice," she said. "Most wedding dresses are white." "Kinsley," I said. "I know," she smiled. "But for you, I mean, with your job you spend all day around dirt and grime. White just seems ironic. It highlights everything. You know, every little flaw, every little speck of dirt. It is like, one wrong move and you are ruined. It is perfect for a cleaner. I guess, because you know how to scrub. Right?" The sales associate, a woman named Elena, who had helped me select the gown, stepped forward, her face tight. She had sensed the toxicity immediately. "This silk is imported from Italy," Elena said, her voice professional but icy toward Kinsley. "It is stain-resistant to a degree, but yes, it is delicate. It is for a bride who carries herself with grace." "Grace," Kinsley snorted. "Right, Noelle and grace, like a mop and a bucket." I turned to Elena. "I will take it. And the veil?" I walked to the counter to pay. The total was $12,000. My mother's eyes widened when she saw the number on the register. "12,000, she hissed. "Noelle, are you insane? Jacob is going to kill you. You cannot afford this." "It is handled," I said. I pulled out my card. It was not a debit card. It was the Centurion card from American Express, the black card. It was made of anodized titanium. It was heavy. I handed it to Elena. Elena looked at the card, then at me. Her eyes widened slightly. She recognized it immediately. You don't see many black cards, and you certainly don't see them in the hands of women who are supposedly janitors. "Of course, Ms. Ashcroft," Elena said, her tone shifting from polite to deferential. "Shall I put the alterations on the corporate account, or—" I caught her eye. I gave a barely perceptible shake of my head. "Don't." Elena paused. She was a professional. She recovered instantly. "Or just the personal line." "Personal," I said. But Kinsley had seen it. She was standing 3 feet away, pretending to look at a display of tiaras, but I saw her reflection in the glass. She was staring at the card in my hand. Her eyes were narrowed. She looked from the heavy black metal card to my face, then back to the card. She didn't know what a Centurion card was, exactly, but she knew it wasn't a debit card from a local credit union. She knew it smelled of money. Real money. "Since when do you have a black credit card?" Kinsley asked, her voice sharp. "It is Jacob's." I lied, sliding it back into my wallet quickly. "He gave me an authorized user card for the wedding expenses." "Jacob has a black card," she asked, skeptical. "Lawyers make money, but that looks like a billionaire card." "He does well," I said, turning away, but the seed was planted. On the drive home, Kinsley was quiet, too quiet. She was texting furiously. I could see the reflection of her screen in the passenger window. She was Googling. Black metal credit card, meaning, who qualifies for Amex Black? Then she looked at me. It wasn't a look of respect. It was a look of suspicion. You know, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. It is amazing how much Jacob trusts you. Giving you a card like that, you could really mess things up for him. Or maybe you already have. Is that why you are rushing this wedding? Did you trap him? Stop it, Kinsley, my mother said. But she didn't sound convincing. She sounded curious. Although it is strange. Noelle, you have been spending a lot lately. Are you sure Jacob is okay with this? We don't want him to wake up and realize he has made a mistake. He is fine, Mom, I said. I bet, Kinsley muttered. I bet he is just a sugar daddy. That is it, isn't it? You are his little charity case. He pays for everything. And you just what? Clean his house. She laughed. It was a cruel, jagged sound. Maybe that is a good angle for a toast, my father said from the back seat. He had been silent, brooding over the lost G-Wagon. We should have some fun at the reception. A little roast. Remind Noelle where she comes from, lest she gets too high and mighty with her $12,000 dress. A roast, Kinsley said, her eyes lighting up. I love that. We could make it interactive. Just a joke. Of course, Gordon added, but his eyes in the rearview mirror met mine, and there was no humor in them. Just to keep you humble, Noelle, someone has to. Yeah, Kinsley whispered, looking out the window. Someone has to pop the bubble. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They weren't just planning to be rude. They were planning a public execution of my dignity. They wanted to strip me bare in front of 300 people, to remind everyone that I was the cleaner, the failure, the charity case. Kinsley's suspicion about the card hadn't led her to the truth that I was a CEO. It had led her to a more comforting lie that I was a gold digger. In her mind, that was the only explanation. I couldn't earn that money. I must have tricked a man into giving it to me. And that made me a target. Later that night, back at the townhouse, I told Jacob about the roast comment. He was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a precision that usually calmed me. He stopped, the knife hovering over a red pepper. They are going to try something, he said. Gordon wasn't joking, and Kinsley, she looked at that card like it was a personal insult. I know, I said. We can cut them, Jacob said. He put the knife down and turned to me. We can rescind the invites. Right now. We can hire security to stop them at the door. Noelle, you don't have to let them do this. I looked at him. I thought about the peace of a wedding without them. It would be beautiful. It would be quiet. But it would be incomplete. If I cut them out, they would spend the rest of their lives playing the victims. They would tell everyone that their ungrateful daughter abandoned them after she married rich. They would control the narrative forever. No, I said. Noelle. I want them there, I said, my voice steady. I want them in the front row. I want them to have the best seats in the house. Why? Jacob asked, baffled. Why give them the platform? Because you cannot convict a criminal if you don't let them commit the crime, I said. I don't want to just avoid a scene. Jacob, I want evidence. I want witnesses. If they are going to try to destroy me, I want them to do it in high definition, with 300 people watching. I want there to be no doubt about who they are. Jacob looked at me for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. You are not planning a wedding anymore, he said softly. You are planning a sting operation. Maybe, I said. But at least the dress will be nice. I didn't tell him that I had already called my lawyer, Marla, to discuss the implications of public defamation. I didn't tell him that I had hired a videography team with specific instructions to keep a rolling camera on my sister at all times, designated as B-roll of the maid of honor. I was setting the stage. If Kinsley wanted to pop the bubble, she was welcome to try. She just didn't realize that the bubble was filled with nitroglycerin. The rain in Savannah does not wash things clean. It just makes everything heavier. It was a Tuesday night, 2 weeks before the wedding, and the sky had opened up, dumping sheets of warm, relentless water onto the city. I sat in the passenger seat of Jacob's car, holding a large, waterproof tube containing the final seating charts. We were driving to my parents' house. The task was simple: drop off the chart, endure 15 minutes of criticism about where we had placed Great Aunt Linda, and leave. We were not expected for dinner. We were just running an errand. "Lights are on," Jacob noted as we pulled into the driveway. The house looked deceptively warm, glowing yellow against the dark, wet backdrop of the storm. We ran from the car to the porch, dodging puddles. I reached for my keys, but out of habit, I tried the handle first. It turned. My parents, secure in their belief that nothing bad could ever happen to them, rarely locked the front door before 10 o'clock at night. I pushed the door open. The foyer was dark, but the light from the living room spilled out across the hallway floor. I stepped inside, shaking the water from my umbrella. I was about to call out, to announce our arrival with a cheerful "hello," when a voice drifted from the living room that froze the air in my lungs. "It has to be red," Kinsley's voice said. It was not her whining voice. It was her excited, planning voice. "White wine will just look like water. Red wine looks like blood, or at least, like a disaster. It needs to pop on camera." I stopped. My hand, which had been reaching for the light switch, hovered in midair, beside me. Jacob stiffened. He looked at me, confusion knitting his eyebrows together. But I pressed a finger to my lips. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a slow, heavy thudding that I felt in my throat. We stood there in the dark foyer, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood, listening to the dissection of my happiness. "And timing is everything," my father's voice rumbled. "You cannot do it during the reception. Kinsley, if you do it at the party, it just looks like a drunk accident. It has to be during the ceremony." "Exactly," Kinsley replied. I could hear the smile in her voice. Right when the pastor starts the vows, that is the quietest moment. The focus is 100% on her, and then bam, splash. The shock value will be insane, I am telling you. This is the kind of clip that gets licensed by news outlets. Wedding fail of the year. "But you have to sell the accident," my mother added. Her voice was calm, critical, like she was directing a school play. "If it looks purposeful, people will turn on you. You have to trip, or maybe say your hand spasmed. You have been complaining about that carpal tunnel from typing on your phone." "I will practice," Kinsley said. "I will wear the heels I bought. I will stumble, grab her for support, and oops, the glass just flies. It will cover that ridiculous white dress. She will look like a crime scene." "Good," Gordon said. I heard the clink of a glass being set down on a coaster. "Let her stand there in front of all those rich people looking like a mess. She needs to be taken down a peg, walking around with that black credit card like she owns the place. She thinks she is better than us. Ruth, she thinks she has escaped." "She has not escaped anything," Ruth said, her voice dripping with venom. "She is still just our Noelle, and we need to make sure everyone else sees that. When it happens, when Kinsley spills it, we cannot look shocked." "What do you mean?" Kinsley asked. "I mean," Ruth continued, "we should not rush to help her. If we rush to help, it looks like a tragedy. No, we should stand up. We should applaud." I felt Jacob's hand grip my shoulder. His fingers dug into my flesh, shaking with rage. I turned to look at him. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a horror that bordered on nausea. He looked like he was watching a murder. "Applaud," Kinsley giggled. "That is savage, Mom. I love it." "It is discipline," Ruth corrected. "It sends a message. It tells the room. We approve of this mess. This is what she deserves for being selfish. It tells everyone that she didn't help her family when we needed it. So now she gets to be humiliated. It frames the narrative. Kinsley, it makes us look like the judges, not the villains." "Brilliant," Gordon agreed. "Just brilliant. Let her play princess for 5 minutes. Then we remind her who really holds the power." I slowly reached into my pocket. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a cold, crystalline adrenaline. I pulled out my phone. I swiped to the voice memo app. I tapped the red button. I held the phone up, angling it toward the archway of the living room. So, just to recap, Kinsley said, unaware that she was dictating her own indictment. I walk up for the maid of honor duty. I have the glass which I shouldn't have, but whatever. I am the sister. Who is going to stop me? I trip. Wine goes everywhere. Noelle cries because she will definitely cry. She is so weak. You guys stand up and clap. Video goes viral. I get 100,000 new followers. And Noelle learns that she cannot just buy a new life without paying the family tax. That is the plan, Gordon said. Simple, effective, and it saves us the cost of a wedding gift. The lesson is the gift. I watched the waveform on my screen oscillate with their voices. Every word was being captured, every chuckle, every pause. Jacob made a move to step forward. He was going to storm in there. He was going to flip the table. He was going to scream at them until the windows rattled. I grabbed his arm with both hands and pulled him back. I put my mouth right against his ear. No, I breathed. Not now. He looked at me, pleading. He wanted to stop it. He wanted to save me. Move, I mouthed. I dragged him backward. We moved like ghosts. We stepped carefully to avoid the squeaky floorboard near the entrance. We backed out of the open door, into the rain. I pulled the handle shut, turning it slowly until the latch clicked silently into place. We ran back to the car. Once we were inside, with the rain drumming deafeningly on the roof, Jacob exploded. "They are monsters!" he shouted, hitting the steering wheel. "Noelle, they are actual psychopaths. Did you hear that? They are planning to assault you. That is assault. And your mother applauding. Who does that? What kind of human being does that to their child?" He was hyperventilating. He looked at me, waiting for me to break down. But I wasn't breaking down. I was scrolling through my contacts. "Drive," I said calmly. "Drive where?" he asked. "To the police station. We have the recording." "Home?" I said. "Drive home, Jacob." "We are canceling the wedding," he stated, starting the engine but looking at me with fierce determination. "I am sending a mass email tonight. We are calling the venue. We are eloping. We are not letting them near you. I will not let you walk into that trap." "We are not canceling," I said. My voice was steady, cutting through the noise of the rain and the engine. "Are you insane?" he snapped. "You want to stand there and let her throw wine on you? You want to be humiliated." "If we cancel," I said, turning to face him, "they win. They will tell everyone I got cold feet, or that I was too cheap to go through with it, or that you left me. They will spin it. Jacob, they are masters of the spin, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to explain why I didn't have a wedding. So what? Who cares what they say?" "I care," I said. "And more importantly, if we cancel, I lose the leverage. Right now, all I have is a recording of a conversation. In court, they could claim it was a joke. They could insist they were just blowing off steam. It was only talk. But the minute they carry the plan out, it stops being talk. It becomes an act. It becomes intent. It becomes harm." Jacob stared at me. The windshield wipers thudded back and forth. "Metronoming the night. You want them to go through with it," he murmured. "It wasn't a question. I want them to trap themselves." I said, "And I want to be the one who sells them the paperwork." I keyed in a number. It was 8:30 at night. But Marla Caldwell answered on the second ring. She was Nightfall's corporate counsel, the kind of woman who ate sharks for breakfast. "Noelle," she said, "is everything all right? It's late. I need to retain you for a personal matter." I said, "Separate from the company. I need to build a litigation strategy for defamation. Intentional infliction of emotional distress and civil conspiracy." There was a beat of silence. "Who's the defendant?" "My parents," I said. "And my sister." I heard Marla shift in her chair. "Okay, start from the beginning." "I have a recording of them conspiring to sabotage a public event, my wedding, for the purpose of financial gain via social media monetization and public humiliation. I need to know how to maximize the damages." "If they go through with it," Marla said, her voice shifting into professional gear, And if you can prove premeditation, which the recording does, you are looking at a very strong case. But Noelle, legal is one thing, optics are another. I know, I said. That is why I need a crisis PR recommendation. I need someone who knows how to handle a viral narrative before it goes viral. I have a contact in Atlanta, Marla said. I will text you the number. One more thing, I said. The videography contract. What about it? I need to amend it. I need to contact the studio first thing in the morning. I want to buy the raw footage rights. Full ownership. No creative license for them. I want every single second of video and audio recorded that day to belong exclusively to me. That is expensive, Marla noted. Usually, studios keep the copyright. I do not care about the cost, I said. I need to ensure that when Kinsley tries to edit the clip to make herself look like a clumsy victim, I have the second angle that shows her smiling. I need the audio from the lapel mics. I need the data. Understood, Marla said. I will draft an addendum. I hung up. Jacob was driving silently now, navigating the slick streets of Savannah. He looked terrified of me. You are scary, he said quietly. I am protected, I corrected. Noelle, he said. You are talking about suing your family. You are talking about destroying them. They are talking about destroying me, I said, replaying the audio in my head. Just our Noelle. The lesson is the gift. I stood in that hallway, Jacob, and I realized something. They don't love me. They don't even like me. To them, I am just a prop. I am a supporting character in the movie of Kinsley's life, and they are rewriting the script to make sure I have a tragic ending. I looked out the window at the passing streetlights, blurred by the rain. I am done being a prop, I said. I am the director now. The next morning, I went to work with a cold efficiency that terrified my staff. I called the videographer, a man named Marcus who was known for his cinematic wedding films. Marcus, I said, I want to change the package. Upgrade, he asked. Total buyout, I said. I want the raw asset clause. I want the SD cards handed to me before you leave the venue. I want the master files. And I want a specific camera operator assigned to a dedicated subject. Okay, Marcus said, sounding intrigued. Who is the subject? The maid of honor, I said. I want a lens on her face from the moment the processional starts until the recessional ends. Do not cut. Do not pan away. Even if the building catches fire, you film her. Is there a reason? She is planning a surprise, I said smoothly, and I want to make sure we capture her reaction perfectly. It wasn't a lie. I spent the next 2 weeks functioning on autopilot. I smiled at my mother when she called to ask if I was nervous. I listened to Kinsley talk about how she was practicing walking in her heels so she wouldn't trip. I watched my father pretend to be the proud patriarch, while I knew he was calculating how much social capital my humiliation would buy him. I did not sleep much. I lay awake at night, listening to the recording over and over again. I needed to desensitize myself. I needed to hear their cruelty so many times that it stopped hurting and just became data. By the time the wedding morning arrived, I felt nothing, no fear, no sadness, just a cold, hard resolve. I was walking into an ambush. I knew exactly where the trap was laid. I knew exactly when the trigger would be pulled. Most people would run. Most people would scream. But I wasn't most people. I was a logistician. I knew that the best way to destroy a trap was not to avoid it, but to trigger it while you were wearing a bomb suit, and then watch the trapper get caught in the blast radius. If they want a stage, I whispered to my reflection in the mirror as I put on my earrings that morning, I will give it to them, but I will keep the script. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Marla. We are a go. Have the papers ready. Then I put on the white dress, knowing it would be red by noon, and I smiled. It was the last time I would smile as their daughter. The next time I smiled, it would be as their creditor. 48 hours after the wedding, my family doubtless imagined I was curled up in a darkened room. weeping into a pillow and scrubbing at a stain that would never come out. They likely pictured Jacob trying to console a hysterical, broken woman who was too ashamed to show her face in public. That was the narrative they had written. And they were probably at home right now, drinking my father's cheap scotch, congratulating themselves on how effectively they had put me back in my box. They were wrong. I was not in bed. I was standing on the 24th floor of the Meridian Tower, looking down at the Savannah River through floor-to-ceiling glass that cost more than my parents' entire house. This was the headquarters of Nightfall Sterile Logistics. It was a space of chrome, glass, and silence, a fortress of competence that I had built while they thought I was scrubbing toilets. The only thing staining my day was the coffee on my desk, which was slightly too cold. "Are you ready for the autopsy?" Marla Caldwell asked. I turned away from the window. Marla was sitting at my conference table, a surface of polished black granite that reflected the gray sky outside. She had not come alone. She had brought 3 bankers' boxes filled with paper and a forensic accountant named David who looked like he could find a missing penny in a federal budget. "Lay it out," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "It is worse than we thought," Marla said, opening the first file. We ran a full asset trace and liability check on Ruth and Gordon Ashcroft, as well as Kinsley Whitaker. We used the authorization forms you have from when you co-signed that car loan for Kinsley 4 years ago, the one you paid off, but they never removed your name from. It gave us a legal backdoor to pull their full credit reports. "Tell me," I said. Marla slid a document across the granite. It was a property title search. "Your parents do not own their house," she stated flatly. "Technically, the bank owns about 95% of it. They have refinanced 3 times in the last 10 years. Each time the market value went up, they pulled the equity out to pay for lifestyle expenses." I looked at the numbers. They were staggering. $340,000, I read aloud. "That is the current principal balance." "Correct," David the accountant chimed in. "And it is an adjustable rate mortgage. The teaser rate expired 6 months ago. Their interest rate jumped from 4% to 9%. Their monthly payment has nearly doubled. They are currently 60 days past due. One more missed payment, and the bank initiates pre-foreclosure proceedings." "They never mentioned this," I said softly. "They just complained about the water bill." "It gets better," Marla said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or worse, they haven't paid property taxes in 2 years. The county has a lien on the home for $12,000. If the bank doesn't foreclose, the tax assessor will seize it eventually." I sat back in my chair. My parents were not just poor. They were destitute. They were living in a house of cards that was already on fire. Yet they had stood up in a church 2 days ago and applauded my humiliation as if they were royalty watching a jester fall. "And Kinsley?" I asked. David opened a separate folder. "Kinsley Whitaker is statistically insolvent. She has 7 credit cards. 6 are maxed out. The total unsecured debt is $58,000. She is paying minimum payments only, and sometimes not even that. Her credit score is 490. "And the car?" I asked. "The Range Rover she loves so much." "Leased," David said. "Through a subprime lender called Ace Automotive Finance. It is a predatory lease. The interest rate is 18%. She is 3 months behind. The lender has already issued a repossession order, but they haven't been able to locate the vehicle because she keeps it in your parents' garage, and the repo agents can't breach a locked private garage without a court order. She is driving a stolen car," I mused. "Essentially," Marla agreed. "But here is the interesting part. The contract has a clause, Clause 4A, assignment of debt. The lender is a small, regional outfit. They are cash poor. They often sell their bad debt to collection agencies for pennies on the dollar just to clear their books." I nodded. "We will come back to that. What else?" Marla hesitated. She exchanged a look with David. It was a look of professional concern, the kind a doctor gives before delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Noelle," Marla said, her tone shifting from efficient to gentle. "We found something else, something criminal." She pushed a document toward me. It was a copy of a loan agreement from a digital bank. It was a home equity line of credit, a HELOC taken out against my parents' house 8 months ago. The amount was for $50,000. They had no equity left, I said, frowning. How did they get a HELOC? They had a cosigner, Marla said. I looked at the signature line at the bottom of the page. There, in ink that looked disturbingly familiar, was a signature Noel A. I stared at it. The loops on the N were slightly too wide. The slant was a little too vertical. It was a good imitation, likely practiced, but it was not mine. I did not sign this, I said. My voice was very quiet. We know, Marla said. We checked your travel records. On the date this document was notarized in Savannah, you were in Zurich negotiating the vaccine transport contract. You were 4,000 miles away. Who notarized it? A friend of your father's, Marla said. A guy named Pete, who runs a shipping center in a strip mall. We suspect he looked the other way, or your mother pretended to be you. Either way, it is bank fraud, and identity theft, and forgery. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was a clarifying freeze. This wasn't just my parents being bad with money. This was my parents stealing my name. They had leveraged my credit, my identity, to fund their illusions, that $50,000 was probably what paid for Kinsley's lifestyle trips and my mother's new wardrobe. They stole $50,000 from a bank in my name, I said. And they are in default on this too, David added. Since you are the cosigner, the bank has already sent 2 warning letters, but they went to your parents' address, so you never saw them. Jacob, who had been standing by the window listening, turned around. His face was hard. This is jail time, Noel, he said. This isn't a lawsuit. This is federal prison, wire fraud. If you press charges, Marla clarified, if we go to the police with this, your parents will be arrested, probably Kinsley too, if she benefited from the funds. I looked at the forged signature. I traced the lines with my finger. I thought about the wine on my dress. I thought about the applause. No, I said. No, Jacob asked, incredulous. Noel, they committed a felony against you. If I go to the police, I said, looking up, it becomes a public scandal. It drags on for months. They get a public defender. They cry to the jury about being desperate parents. Maybe they get probation. Maybe they get a plea deal. It is too messy, and it is too impersonal. So what do you want to do? Marla asked. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the container ships moving slowly down the river. They were massive, unstoppable forces, guided by precise logistics. I want to own it, I said. I turned back to the room. Marla, Tidewater Holdings has a distressed asset acquisition fund, correct? Yes, she said slowly. Usually for buying out failing medical supply chains. We are pivoting, I said. I want Tidewater Holdings to purchase the debt, all of it. I want to buy the mortgage from their bank. I want to buy the car note from Ace Automotive, and I want to buy the fraudulent HELOC from the digital lender. Marla's eyes widened. You want to become your parents' creditor? Banks want to get bad debt off their books, I said, my mind working fast, calculating the steps. The mortgage is non-performing. The car loan is toxic. The HELOC is in default. If a private equity firm like Tidewater approaches them with a cash offer to buy the debt at 80 cents on the dollar, will they take it? In a heartbeat, David said. Especially the car guy. He would kiss you. Do it, I ordered. Draft the purchase agreements today. Wire the funds. By tomorrow morning, I want Tidewater Holdings to be the legal owner of the house they live in, the car Kinsley drives, and the loan they forged my name on. Noel, Jacob said, stepping closer, you know what this means. You will hold the deed. You will hold the title. Exactly, I said. If the bank forecloses, it is just business. If I foreclose, it is justice. But they won't know it is you. Marla pointed out. Tidewater is anonymous. They will just think their debt was sold to a collection agency. For now, I said, let them think that. Let them think they are dealing with a faceless corporation. I want to see how they treat a creditor they think they can manipulate. I walked back to the table and picked up the forgery. Here is the strategy, I said. Step 1. We acquire the debt. Step 2. We issue an immediate demand for payment in full regarding the car. We trigger the default clause on the mortgage. And for the HELOC, we send a notice of investigation regarding the signature irregularity. You are boxing them in, Marla said, taking notes furiously. I am checking the locks, I corrected. They think money is something you can just charm out of people. They think debt is something you can cry your way out of. I am going to teach them that math does not care about their tears. This is going to cost you, David noted. To buy all this debt, you are looking at an outlay of maybe $400,000 in cash from the company reserves. It is not a cost, I said. It is an acquisition. The house is an asset. The car is an asset. Even the forgery is an asset. It is leverage. If they refuse to leave quietly when the time comes, I hold the criminal charges over their heads like a guillotine. I looked at Jacob. Are you okay with this? It is company money. Technically, it is our money. Jacob looked at the forged signature again. He looked at the report of the $340,000 my parents had squandered while judging my poverty. Buy it, he said. Buy every cent of it. The rest of the afternoon was a flurry of electronic signatures and wire transfers. I sat there, signing document after document. Assignment of mortgage, transfer of lien, purchase of promissory note. With every signature, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For years, I had felt helpless against their emotional manipulation. I had felt like the child begging for love. But now, the dynamic had physically shifted. I was no longer the daughter seeking approval. I was the institution seeking repayment. By 4 p.m, the confirmations started rolling in. Transaction complete. Tidewater Holdings is now the lien holder of record for 442 Oak Street. Tidewater Holdings is now the title holder for the 2024 Range Rover. I held the final paper in my hand. It was the ownership of the HELOC debt. This piece of paper was the smoking gun. It proved they had committed a crime. And now, I owned the evidence. I wasn't just a witness anymore. I was the prosecutor, the judge, and the warden. Marla, I said, stacking the papers into a neat pile. Draft the first notices. Send them via courier tomorrow morning. I want them to arrive while they are having breakfast. What tone should the letters take? Marla asked. Corporate, I said. Cold, automated. Dear debtor, this is to inform you that your obligation has been transferred to Tidewater Holdings. An immediate audit of your account indicates severe delinquency. Please remit the full balance of $390,000 within 30 days or surrender the collateral. Use the standard legal boilerplate. They are going to panic, David said. Good, I said. Panic makes people sloppy. Panic makes them reveal who they really are. I stood up and walked over to Jacob. He took my hand. His grip was warm and solid. You didn't shed a single tear today, he observed quietly. I am done crying over them. Jacob, I said, tears are for people you can save. You cannot save people who steal your identity to buy relevance. I looked down at the bustling port one last time. Somewhere out there, a crane was lifting a container filled with life-saving medicine that my company was responsible for. I was good at my job. I ensured that things got to where they needed to go. And my parents were heading toward a destination they had mapped out for themselves years ago. I was just driving the truck now. Let's go home, I said to Jacob. I have a wedding dress to dry clean. I want to keep it. Why? He asked. Because, I said, picking up my purse and the file containing the forgery. It reminds me of the day I finally grew up. We walked out of the glass office, leaving the view of the city behind. On the desk, the file lay closed. Inside was the end of the Ashcroft family facade, bought and paid for by the daughter they thought was worthless. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for them to step into it. The phone call came at 10 o'clock on Thursday morning. just as the courier tracking notification on my laptop turned green, indicating that the package from Tidewater Holdings had been delivered to my parents' front porch. It was not a phone call. It was an air raid siren. I put the phone on speaker and set it down on the black granite conference table. Marla was sitting across from me, sipping tea. Jacob was pacing by the window. We all listened as my mother's voice filled the room, shrill and trembling with a rage that was almost operatic. "Who are these people?" "Noelle," Ruth screamed. There was no hello. There was no, "How are you holding up after your sister ruined your wedding?" There was certainly no, "I am sorry." There was only the sound of a woman who had just realized the ground was opening up beneath her feet. "Mom, calm down," I said, pitching my voice to sound small and frightened. It was a reflex, slipping back into the role of the scared daughter, but this time it was a performance. "What people?" "Tidewater Holdings," she shrieked. "Some vulture fund. They sent a letter, a demand letter. They say they bought our mortgage, and the car note, and God, Noelle. They say they bought the line of credit too. They are demanding full payment, $390,000, or they are going to take the house. They gave us 30 days. I looked at Marla. She gave me a tiny, sharp nod. The bait was taken. "That sounds serious," I said. "But why are you calling me I am just a cleaner? Remember? Do not get smart with me," Ruth snapped. "Not now. We are losing everything. Your father is in the garage trying to hide the Range Rover because the letter said something about immediate repossession. He is having chest pains. Noelle, you are killing him." The audacity was breathtaking. 4 days ago, they had clapped while I stood soaked in red wine. Now, because a faceless company sent a letter, I was killing my father. "I don't have $300,000, Mom," I said, letting a wobble enter my voice. "But he does," she yelled. "That husband of yours. The lawyer, we saw the card. Noelle, we saw the black card. Don't lie to me. You have access to money. You need to fix this. You owe us this much after the embarrassment you caused with that scene at the church." I froze. I actually stopped breathing for a second. She was blaming me for the scene, in her twisted reality. Kinsley throwing the wine was probably my fault for standing in the wrong place, or for wearing a dress that was too white. "You want me to ask Jacob for money?" I asked slowly. "I want you to bring his checkbook," she commanded, "and empty your savings, whatever you have squirreled away from your little janitor job. We need a down payment to stop these people. We need to show good faith. You are coming over tonight." "I can't tonight," I said. "Jacob, he is furious about the wedding. He won't write a check if I just ask him." "Then work on him," she hissed. "Cry if you have to. You are good at playing the victim. Just get the money." "Okay," I said, injecting a note of desperate compliance into my tone. "Okay, I will try, but we can't meet at the house. He won't go back there. Not yet." "Fine," she said impatiently. "Where then?" "The Harbor Light Supper Club," I said. The name hung in the air. The Harbor Light was one of the most exclusive, old-money establishments in Savannah. It was the kind of place where memberships were inherited, not bought. It was the kind of place my parents had always desperately wanted to be seen, but could never afford. The Harbor Light. Her tone changed instantly. It went from hysterical to greedy. "You can get a table there." "Jacob is a member," I lied. "We can meet there on Saturday night, 7 o'clock. If I can convince him to help, we can give you the check there, over dinner." "Well," she said, her voice smoothing out into a purr of satisfaction, "that sounds civilized. Make sure we get a table by the water. And Noelle, tell him to bring the good checkbook. We need to clear this whole mess up, so Kinsley can focus on her content creation without this stress." "I will tell him," I said. "Good girl," she said. "See, I knew you would step up. Saturday. Don't be late." She hung up. The silence in my office was heavy. Jacob looked like he wanted to punch a hole in the wall. "She didn't apologize," he said, his voice thick with disbelief. "She asked for my money to save the car for the sister who destroyed our wedding, and she didn't even say sorry." She thinks she is entitled to it, I said, dropping the scared daughter voice and returning to my normal, cool cadence. She thinks the wedding was just a hiccup, a little drama. Now back to business. So, we are going to dinner, Marla asked. We are going to an execution, I said, but we are serving appetizers first. I spent the next 48 hours choreographing the evening with the precision of a military operation. This was logistics. This was what I did best. I moved assets. I coordinated timelines, and I ensured that everyone arrived at the destination at the exact same moment. First, I called the harbor light. I didn't need Jacob's membership. I had a corporate membership through nightfall. I booked the captain's room, a private dining space separated from the main floor by glass doors. It was soundproof, elegant, and crucially, it had a discreet security camera system used for high-stakes business arbitrations. Booking name, the concierge asked. Tidewater Holdings, I said. And I want to activate the clause in my membership contract regarding internal security recording. I want the room audio and video recorded for compliance purposes. Certainly. Ms. Ashcroft. Next, I coordinated the ground team. I called the repossession agency that worked with Ace Automotive the debt I now owned. I spoke to the lead agent, a man with a gravelly voice named Miller. The vehicle is a white 2024 Range Rover, I told him. License plate KW-style. It has been hidden in a garage, but on Saturday night at 7 o'clock, it will be parked in the valet lot of the Harbor Light Supper Club. That is private property, Miller grunted. Valet lots are tricky. I am the lien holder, I said. And I am authorizing the seizure. I will have the paperwork on site. You have my permission to hook it the second they hand the keys to the valet. But don't tow it immediately. Just hook it. Wait for my signal. Copy that, Miller said. He sounded happy. A guaranteed hook was an easy payday. Then came the process server. I hired a man who didn't look like a process server. I hired a man who looked like a sommelier. He would be waiting in the kitchen. Finally, I sat down with Jacob. You have the hardest job, I told him on Saturday afternoon as we were getting dressed. He was putting on a navy suit, the same one he wore to court when he was about to dismantle a hostile witness. I just have to sit there and not strangle them, he said. No, I said. You have to be the evidence. I handed him a new iPad Pro. I have loaded everything onto this, the video from the wedding, the raw footage we bought from the videographer, the audio recording of them planning the spill, the scans of the forged HELOC document, the purchase agreements for their debt. It is all there, indexed and ready to play. When do I show it? When they think they have won, I said. Wait until they ask for the check. Wait until they are smiling. Jacob looked at me. I was wearing a black dress. It was severe, high-necked, and tailored to within an inch of its life. It was not a dress for a family dinner. It was a dress for a funeral. You are terrifying, he said. But he kissed my forehead. I love you. I love you too, I said. Now let's go pay the bill. We arrived at the Harbor Light at 6:45. The manager, who knew me as the CEO of Nightfall, nodded discreetly as he led us to the private room. It was beautiful, mahogany walls, a view of the moonlit river, and a table set with heavy silver and crystal. But to me, it looked like a courtroom. I placed my purse on the chair. Inside, there was no lipstick, there was no compact, there was a thick black leather folder containing the original debt instruments, the transfer of ownership documents, and the foreclosure notices. It weighed 3 pounds. It felt like a brick. They are here, Jacob said, looking through the glass doors. I turned to watch them arrive. My parents and Kinsley were walking through the main dining room. They looked festive. My mother was wearing the silk scarf she had bought instead of paying the water bill. My father was wearing a blazer that I knew he had bought on credit. And Kinsley was wearing a red dress. It was a deliberate choice. It was the same shade of red as the wine she had thrown on me. It was a taunt. She was strutting, her phone in her hand, filming herself as she walked through the restaurant, capturing the ambiance to show her followers that she was living the high life. They looked like they were arriving for a coronation. They walked with the swagger of people who believed they had successfully bullied their way back into solvency. They thought they were walking into a bank vault to make a withdrawal. They didn't know they were walking into a shredder. When they entered the private room, the air changed. It became sucked of oxygen. "Well," my father said, booming as he looked around, "this is more like it. Good work. Noel, this is a proper venue." He sat down at the head of the table, or tried to. I had already placed my black folder on that seat. "That is my seat, Dad," I said. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. He blinked, confused. "Excuse me." I said, "That is my seat. You can sit there." I pointed to the side. For a second, his face darkened. He wasn't used to being directed. But then he remembered the money. He remembered the $300,000 he thought I was bringing. He swallowed his pride. Fine," he muttered, moving to the side chair. "We don't need to stand on ceremony." Ruth sat down, her eyes scanning the table. "Did you order wine? We should celebrate. It is not every day the family gets together to fix things." "I ordered a bottle of the Cabernet," I said. 1996? Kinsley laughed. "Careful. Noel, you know what happens with red wine around you?" Jacob's hand clenched into a fist on the table. I placed my hand over his. "I thought it was appropriate," I said, "since we are here to discuss spilled assets." "Cute," Kinsley said, rolling her eyes. She looked at Jacob. "So, Jacob, nice suit. You look like you are ready to write a big check. How does it feel to be the savior?" Jacob looked at her. His eyes were cold, flat surfaces. "I am not a savior. Kinsley, I am a lawyer. I deal in facts." "Boring," she sang out, opening the menu. "I am getting the lobster and the truffle risotto. Dad, you should get the steak. If we are doing this, we are doing it right." They ordered like kings. They ordered appetizers, seafood towers, the most expensive entrees. They treated the waiters with that specific mix of dismissal and entitlement that characterizes people who have never actually worked in service. For an hour, I watched them eat. I picked at a salad. Jacob drank water. We let them fill their stomachs. We let them drink the expensive wine. We let them relax. As the meal went on, the tension in their shoulders dropped. They started talking about the future. "Once this debt is cleared," Gordon said, leaning back and picking his teeth, "I think we should look into refinancing the house again in 6 months. Interest rates might drop. We could pull out some equity to redo the pool." "And the car," Kinsley added. "Mom, if Noel pays off the lease, does that mean I own it? Or do we still have to make payments?" "We will own it," Ruth said confidently. "Or at least, the pressure will be off. We can trade it in for the G-Wagon later." They were spending the money I hadn't given them yet. They were planning their next cycle of consumption on the grave of my finances. "So," Ruth said, wiping her mouth and looking at me expectantly, "the check?" "It is getting late, and I want to sleep soundly tonight, knowing those Tidewater people are off our backs." "Yes," Gordon said. "Let's handle the business. Hand it over. Noel." He held out his hand, palm up, expectant. I looked at his hand. It was a hand that had never lifted a finger to help me, but was always ready to take. "You want the check," I said. "Don't be dramatic," Ruth snapped. "Just give it to him. We know you have it." "I don't have a check," I said quietly. The room went silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. "What?" Kinsley asked, her voice sharp. "You said—" "I said I would meet you here," I said. "I didn't say I was paying your debt." "You little—" Gordon started to rise, his face turning red. "You brought us here to embarrass us. You wasted our time." "Sit down," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had the steel of a CEO commanding a boardroom. "I said sit down." Gordon hovered, unsure. "I didn't bring a check," I continued, "because I don't need to pay Tidewater Holdings." "Why not?" Ruth demanded. "They are going to take the house." "They aren't going to take the house," I said, "because I am Tidewater Holdings." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. "What?" Kinsley whispered. "I own Tidewater Holdings," I said, enunciating every syllable. "It is my company. I built it. I run it. And 2 days ago, I used its capital reserves to buy your debt." I reached into my bag and pulled out the black folder. I dropped it on the table. It landed with a heavy, solid thud that rattled the crystal glasses. "I bought your mortgage," I said, looking at my father. "I bought your car lease," I said, looking at Kinsley. "And I bought the fraudulent line of credit you opened in my name," I said, looking at my mother. "I am not your daughter right now," I said, leaning forward, my eyes locking onto theirs. "I am your creditor, and I am calling the loans." My mother's face went white, a sickly, chalky white that made her rouge look like clown makeup. "You can't," she stammered. "You are lying. You are a janitor." "Open the folder," I said. Gordon reached out with a shaking hand. He opened the leather cover. The first thing he saw was the assignment of mortgage, notarized and stamped. He saw the name Tidewater Holdings and then, on the line for authorized signatory, he saw my signature, the real one. "No," he wheezed. "No, this is a trick." "It is a trap," I corrected. "And you are already in it." Jacob placed the iPad on the table. He tapped the screen. The video from the wedding began to play. It showed Kinsley, in high definition, smirking. It showed the glass leaving her hand with intention. It showed my parents standing up to applaud. "We have the evidence," Jacob said calmly. "We have the recording of you planning it. We have the financial trail of the fraud. We have everything." "You thought you were coming here to get paid," I said, my voice cold as ice. "You were, but not with money. You are paying with consequences." Outside the glass walls of our private room, I saw movement. The sommelier, my process server, was walking toward the door with a silver tray, but instead of dessert, he was carrying a stack of thick envelopes. At the same time, Kinsley's phone buzzed on the table, then it buzzed again, and again. A notification popped up on her screen. "Alert vehicle movement detected." "My car," she gasped, grabbing her phone. "My app says my car is moving." "It is not moving," I said. "It is being hooked. The repo team is in the parking lot. You have been driving a stolen car, Kinsley, and the owner just took it back." The color drained from Kinsley's face. She looked at me with pure, unadulterated terror. For the first time in her life, she wasn't looking at her sister. She was looking at a stranger who held her life in her hands. My mother started to cry. But this time, it wasn't the fake, manipulative crying. It was the terrified sobbing of a woman who realizes the walls are closing in. "Noelle, please," she wailed. "We are family." "No," I said, standing up. "We are a limited liability corporation, and you are a bad investment." I looked at them one last time, the red dress, the expensive blazer, the silk scarf, all of it bought with money they didn't have, to impress people they didn't like, while crushing the daughter who could have saved them. "Enjoy the dinner," I said. "I will put it on my tab. It is the last meal you will ever eat at my expense." I signaled to the waiter to let the process server in. As the door opened, bringing the reality of the legal system into their private pity party, I took Jacob's arm. We turned to leave. Behind us, the wailing started, but it sounded distant, muffled by the soundproof glass and the weight of my indifference. I didn't look back. I had a dress to dry clean, and an empire to run. The air in the captain's room of the Harbor Light Supper Club smelled of old money, lemon butter, and the distinct, metallic scent of impending violence. We had arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, but my family was already there. They had clearly arrived early to maximize the experience, treating the reservation like a loot drop they had been waiting to raid. When Jacob and I walked through the glass doors, the tableau before us was almost impressive in its lack of shame. The table was already crowded with appetizers. A 3-tier seafood tower stood in the center. weeping condensation onto the white tablecloth, piled high with lobster tails, king crab legs, and oysters that cost $4 apiece. A bottle of Dom Perignon, already half empty, sat in a silver bucket. Ruth and Gordon were beaming. Kinsley was busy photographing a prawn, holding it up to the light to get the best angle for her story. They did not look like people facing foreclosure. They looked like people who had just won the lottery and were spending the winnings before the check cleared. "Finally!" Ruth cried out when she saw us, waving a napkin that was likely silk. "We were starving. You know how stress affects your father's blood sugar. We had to order a little something to start." "A little something," Jacob murmured beside me, his voice tight. "That tower costs $250. Sit, Gordon commanded, gesturing to the chairs opposite them with a magnanimity that made my skin crawl. "Noelle, you look severe. Is that a funeral dress? You should wear more color. It makes you look less washed out." I sat down. I placed my black leather folder on the floor beside my chair. It was heavy, packed with 3 inches of legal documents, and setting it down felt like priming a landmine. "We are celebrating," Kinsley announced, popping an oyster into her mouth and discarding the shell on the table instead of the provided plate. "Mom said you are sorting out the finance thing. Honestly, Noelle, about time. I was getting worried I'd have to actually return the Range Rover. Do you know how embarrassing that would be? I have a brand reputation." "We wouldn't want that," I said, my voice smooth and flat. "Exactly," she said, wiping her hands. "So, did you bring the check? Or is it a wire transfer? Dad says wires are faster. We need it to hit the bank by Monday morning to stop those Tidewater vultures." "Let's eat first," I said. "We have plenty to discuss." The meal was an exercise in endurance. I watched them consume. They ate with a frantic, performative hunger, ordering the most expensive items on the menu not because they wanted them, but because they could. Gordon ordered the Wagyu ribeye, medium well. Ruth ordered the Chilean sea bass and a side of truffle mac and cheese. Kinsley ordered 2 appetizers as entrees because she couldn't decide. They talked over each other, ignoring Jacob and me entirely unless it was to ask for the salt or to complain about the service. They didn't mention the wedding. They didn't mention the ruined dress. They didn't mention the applause. It was as if the event had been erased from history, replaced by this new reality where I was simply their banker. Finally, as the waiter cleared the plates, Kinsley leaned back, sipping her 3rd glass of champagne. She looked at me, her eyes glazed and mean. "You are so quiet tonight, Noelle," she drawled. "Still sulking about the dress god. Get over it. It is just fabric. You act like I shot someone." "It was silk," I said. "Custom silk." "It was a prop," she scoffed. "And honestly, it looked better with the red. Gave it some contrast. You were too pale anyway. Besides, you are used to dealing with stains, right? Isn't that what you do? Scrub, scrub, scrub?" She laughed. It was a wet, jagged sound. "Why are you so tense? You are used to cleaning up messes. This is just another one. Just write the check and scrub it away." I felt a calm, cold clarity settle over me. That was it. That was the sentence. "You are used to cleaning up messes." I looked at Jacob. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. "You are right, Kinsley," I said. "I am very good at cleaning up." Gordon slapped the table. "Good. That is the attitude. Now, waiter the check." He snapped his fingers. Actually snapped them. The waiter, a professional named Arthur who had worked at the Harbor Light for 20 years, approached with the leather bill folder. He went to place it in the center of the table, but Ruth reached out and tapped the air, pointing at me with a manicured finger. "Give it to her," Ruth said, lifting her chin in a gesture of regal permission. "She is treating us. It is the least she can do." Arthur placed the bill in front of me. I didn't open it. I knew it was over $1,500. The room went quiet. They were watching me. They were waiting for the ritual. They expected me to reach into my purse, pull out the credit card, Jacob's black card, and pay for their gluttony. Then, they expected me to pull out the checkbook and save their house. I stared at the bill for a long moment. "Well," Gordon barked, "get on with it. We need to go over the transfer details. I want to be at the bank when the doors open at 9 o'clock. I reached down to the floor. I didn't pick up my purse. I picked up the black folder. I lifted it with both hands. It was thick, bound and heavy, textured leather with metal-reinforced corners. I raised it 6 inches above the table and let it drop. Thud. The sound was heavy and dead. It caused the crystal water glasses to jump. The silverware rattled against the china. It was the sound of a gavel hitting a block. Gordon blinked. "What is that?" "That," I said, "is the check." I opened the folder. There were no bank drafts inside. There were no personal checks. The first page was a document titled Assignment of Deed of Trust. It was stamped with the official seal of the Chatham County Clerk's Office. The paper was thick, cream-colored, and official. "What is this?" Ruth asked, squinting at the text. "This isn't money." "Read it," I said. Gordon pulled the folder toward him. He put on his reading glasses, his brow furrowing. "Assignment of mortgage," he read aloud, his voice wavering slightly. "Transfer of lien from SunTrust Bank to Tidewater Holdings." He looked up, confused. "Tidewater, that is the company that sent the demand letter. Why do you have their internal papers?" "Keep reading," I said. "Turn the page." He turned the page. Assignment of vehicle lease agreement, he read. Transfer of title and rights for 12024 Range Rover, VIN ending in 459, from Ace Automotive Finance to Tidewater Holdings. Kinsley sat up straight. "Why do you have papers about my car?" "Turn the page," I commanded. My voice was no longer the voice of their daughter. It was the voice of the person who signed their paychecks. Gordon turned the page. His hands were starting to shake. "Promissory note and HELOC agreement," he whispered. "Notice of default and acceleration." He looked at the bottom of the document. He stared at it. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "What?" Ruth demanded, grabbing his arm. "Gordon, what is it?" "The signature," Gordon wheezed. "Look at the signature." Ruth leaned in. Kinsley leaned in. At the bottom of the transfer of debt agreement, on the line designated for the purchasing entity/authorized officer, was a signature. It was bold, it was sharp, it was written in blue ink that looked like it had been carved into the paper. Noel Ashcroft, CEO. The silence that descended on the table was heavier than the folder. It was a suffocating, physical weight. Kinsley looked from the paper to me. Her eyes were wide, the pupils dilated with shock. The smirk was gone, the arrogance was gone. In its place was the dawning realization of a horror she couldn't comprehend. "CEO," she whispered. You are a janitor." "No," I said. "I am the owner of Nightfall Sterile Logistics, and Nightfall owns Tidewater Holdings." I leaned forward. I rested my elbows on the table, interlacing my fingers. "And Tidewater Holdings," I continued, "owns you." Ruth let out a small, strangled squeak. She pulled her hand back from the table as if the folder were radioactive. "You bought our debt?" Gordon asked, his voice trembling. "You bought the mortgage." "I bought all of it," I said. "I bought the $340,000 you owe on the house. I bought the $58,000 Kinsley owes on the car. And I bought the $50,000 fraudulent loan you took out in my name." "Noel," Ruth gasped. "No, you are helping us. You did this to help us, right? To keep the bank away." "I didn't come here to pay your debt, Mother," I said. "I came here to collect it." I flipped the folder open to the final section. It was a document titled Causes of Foreclosure and Intent to Cure. "You are in default," I stated. "You haven't paid your mortgage in 4 months. You haven't paid your property taxes in 2 years, and Kinsley hasn't made a car payment since she drove it off the lot." "But we are family," Kinsley cried out, her voice cracking. "You can't be our creditor. That is illegal. Isn't it illegal? Jacob." She looked at Jacob, desperate for a lifeline. Jacob, who had been sitting silently, observing the carnage with the detached precision of a surgeon, finally spoke. "Actually," Jacob said, his voice calm and terrifyingly pleasant, "it is perfectly legal. Distressed debt is a commodity. Anyone can buy it, and once they buy it, they have all the rights of the original lender, plus interest." He picked up his wine glass, swirled the water, and looked at them. "You wanted to know about the fee," Jacob said. "You asked Noelle to pay the fee for being your daughter. Well, she is done paying." He gestured to the remnants of the seafood tower, the empty champagne bottle, and the red dress Kinsley was wearing. "Everything you ate tonight," Jacob said. "Every stitch of clothing you are wearing, the roof over your heads, the car in the parking lot, and even that applause you gave at the wedding, it all has a price tag, and the bill is due now." "We can't pay," Gordon whispered. He looked small. The blustering patriarch was gone, replaced by an old, frightened man in a cheap blazer. "Noelle, we don't have $390,000. You know we don't." "I know," I said. "That is why I brought the other paperwork." I tapped the folder. "I am not asking for a check. Dad, I am initiating asset recovery." "Asset recovery?" Ruth asked, tears beginning to spill down her cheeks, real tears this time. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "that I am not here to save your lifestyle. I am here to liquidate it." Kinsley started to hyperventilate. "You are joking. Tell me you are joking. You are pranking us for TikTok, right? This is a revenge prank." "The only joke," I said, "is that you thought you could spill wine on the woman who owns your title deed and walk away laughing." I stood up. The movement was sharp. "The waiter will bring the check for this dinner," I said. "I suggest you pay it, because if you don't, I will add it to the lien on the house, and at 18% interest. A $1,500 dinner becomes very expensive, very quickly." I looked down at them one last time. They looked like wax figures melting under heat. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the institution. I was the bank. And the bank does not forgive stains. "Welcome to the real world," I said. "I hope you enjoyed the lobster." The silence in the private dining room was not empty. It was pressurized. It was the heavy, vibrating stillness that precedes a structural collapse. My family sat frozen around the debris of their gluttony, the empty oyster shells, the half-eaten wagyu, the drained champagne bottle staring at the black folder that had transformed from a prop into a guillotine. Then, Kinsley's phone screamed. It was not her usual ringtone, the trendy pop song she used to curate her bubbly online persona. It was the harsh, jarring default alarm of an unknown caller. She jumped, her hand knocking a silver fork against her china plate with a sharp clatter. She looked at the screen, her eyes darting from the number to me, then back to the number. "Answer it," I said. I picked up my water glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. "It is for you," Kinsley answered, her voice trembling. "Hello." I watched the color drain from her face in real time. It started at her forehead and washed down to her neck, leaving her looking gray and sickly against the vibrant red of her dress. "What do you mean?" she squeaked. "You can't? It is in a valet lot. That is private property. You can't just—" She stopped, listening to the voice on the other end. "No, I do not consent. I am coming out there." She scrambled up from her chair, dropping the phone. It clattered onto the table. "They are towing it!" she screamed at Gordon. "Dad, they are taking the Rover. They are hooking it up right now." She turned to run toward the glass doors, desperate to save the metal box that defined her self-worth. But before she could take 2 steps, her phone lit up again on the table. A notification banner unfurled across the lock screen. It was a high-priority email from a secure document server. I spoke to her back. "Check your email. Kinsley." She froze. The tone of my voice, calm and authoritative, acted like a leash. She turned around slowly, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grasp the device. She unlocked it. She opened the email. It was a digital copy of the repossession order. "Look at the bottom," I instructed. Look at the authorization code. She zoomed in. Her breath hitched. The authorization code on the digital document on her screen was identical to the file number printed on the black folder sitting on the table. Authorization, Tidewater Holdings, Asset Recovery Division. You, she whispered, looking at me with the eyes of a trapped animal. You are doing this. Right now. You are texting them. I am not texting anyone, I said. This is an automated workflow. It triggers when a debt is confirmed as toxic. You are driving a car you haven't paid for in 3 months. Kinsley, you thought you were driving a status symbol. You were driving a stolen asset. Dad, she wailed, turning to Gordon. Do something. Go stop them. Tell them who you are. Gordon opened his mouth, likely to summon the bluster he had used to bully waiters and subordinates for 40 years. But before he could speak, the glass door to our private room opened again. It was not the waiter. Marla Caldwell walked in. She was wearing a charcoal suit that looked sharp enough to cut glass. She carried a slim leather briefcase and an aura of absolute legal menace. She did not look at the seafood tower. She did not look at the river view. She walked straight to the table and placed 3 thick cream-colored envelopes in the center, right on top of the spilled oyster ice. Mr. and Mrs. Ashcroft, Marla said, her voice devoid of any warmth. Miss Whitaker, I am Marla Caldwell, General Counsel for Tidewater Holdings. You have been served. Served? Ruth gasped, clutching her napkin to her chest. Served with what? We are eating dinner. You are concluding a meeting with your creditor, Marla corrected. She pointed to the first envelope. That is a notice to quit. It is regarding the property at 442 Oak Street, since the mortgage is in default and the deed has been assigned to my client. We are exercising our right to accelerate the loan. You have 30 days to pay the full balance of $340,000. If you fail to do so, eviction proceedings will commence immediately. Eviction, Gordon sputtered. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. You cannot evict us. That is my house. I have lived there for 30 years. It was your house, Marla said calmly, until you stopped paying for it. Now, it is just a building owned by my client, and you are squatting in it. She pointed to the second envelope. That is for you, Ms. Whitaker. It is a deficiency notice for the vehicle. The auction value will likely not cover the full loan amount plus the penalty fees. You will be liable for the difference. We will be garnishing any future wages to recover it. Wages? Kinsley choked out. I don't have wages. I am a creator. Then we will garnish your revenue streams, Marla said. Venmo, PayPal, brand affiliate payouts. We will freeze it all. And the third envelope, Marla said, turning her gaze to my mother. Her eyes were hard. This is the most serious. It is a formal request for a handwriting analysis regarding the signature on the home equity line of credit document. Ruth flinched, as if Marla had raised a hand to strike her. My client has flagged this loan as fraudulent, Marla stated. We have travel records proving Noelle Ashcroft was out of the country when this document was signed. Unless you can provide a notarized affidavit explaining this discrepancy within 48 hours, we are obligated to refer the matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Wire fraud and identity theft carry mandatory minimum sentences. The room spun. I could see it in their eyes. They were dizzy with the speed of the assault. 10 minutes ago, they were eating lobster. Now, they were homeless, carless, and facing prison. Gordon tried to laugh. It was a grotesque sound, a wheezing chuckle that bubbled up from his chest. He looked at me, his eyes wide and desperate, trying to find the little girl who used to be afraid of thunder. Okay, he said, holding up his hands. Okay, Noelle, you made your point. Very dramatic, very cinematic. You got us. Good joke. The car. The lawyer, you really went all out. But come on, let's stop playing now. Tell these people to stand down. We are family. You wouldn't actually arrest your mother. He reached for his wine glass. His hand was shaking so violently that the stem rattled against the base. He tried to lift it to his lips, perhaps to hide his trembling mouth, but his grip failed. The glass tipped. The dark red liquid splashed out. It hit the pristine white tablecloth and spread instantly. It soaked into the fabric, a jagged crimson wound that mirrored exactly the stain on my chest from 2 days ago. We all stared at the spill. "It is not a joke, Dad," I said softly, "and that looks familiar, doesn't it?" Jacob stepped forward. He placed the iPad Pro on the table, propping it up against the champagne bucket so everyone could see the screen. "Since we are talking about spilled wine," Jacob said, "let's review the tape." He pressed play. The video was crystal clear. It was shot in 4K resolution at 60 frames per second. It showed Kinsley standing at the altar. It showed the micro-expression I had seen, the tightening of the jaw. The focus in her eyes. It showed her wrist snap. It was not a slip. It was a throw. Then, the camera angle shifted. This was the second camera I had paid for. The one focused on the front row, on the screen. Gordon and Ruth stood up. They were not looking at me with concern. They were looking at Kinsley with pride. They started clapping. The slow, rhythmic applause echoed from the iPad speakers, filling the silent dining room. "Look at your faces," Jacob said. His voice was filled with a quiet, burning disgust. "You weren't shocked. You were delighted. You enjoyed it. You enjoyed breaking her." "That is out of context," Ruth shrieked. "We were trying to diffuse the tension. We were clapping to show support." "Support for whom?" I asked. "For the arsonist." Kinsley wasn't looking at the video. She was staring at her phone again. Another notification had come through. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." "What is it?" I asked. "Did they hook the back bumper?" "It is Lumiere," she stammered. Lumiere was the clean beauty brand she had been bragging about for weeks. The partnership that was supposed to launch her into the big leagues. "What do they say?" I asked. She read the email, her voice barely audible. "Dear Kinsley, in light of recent video footage circulating regarding your conduct at a private event, specifically the malicious destruction of property, we are terminating our partnership effective immediately. Our brand values kindness and authenticity. Your actions do not align." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her contour. How do they know I haven't posted anything?" "I didn't say I leaked it," I said, shrugging. "But people talk. The videographer has a portfolio. Maybe he shared a clip with a potential client. Or maybe—" I leaned in. "The world is just smaller than you think when you are messy." It was a lie. Of course, I had sent the clip to the brand's PR department anonymously 2 hours ago. It was a strategic strike on her supply line. Kinsley dropped her head into her hands. "My career," she sobbed. "It is over. If Lumiere drops me, everyone drops me. I am blacklisted." "You are not blacklisted," I said. "You are just unfunded. There is a difference. Now you have to work for a living. I hear Uber Eats is hiring. You suggested that to me. Remember?" Ruth stood up. She walked around the table. She came to my side. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked small. She looked old. She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled away. "Noelle," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Baby, please, you cannot take the house. Where will we go? Your father is 65. We have nowhere. We have no savings. We spent it all on keeping things going." I waited. I waited for the sentence. I waited for, "I am sorry." I waited for, "I should not have clapped." I waited for, "I love you more than the house." "We will be on the street," she cried. "Think of the neighbors. Think of what people will say. It will kill your father to be humiliated like this." She was still talking about the house. She was still talking about their reputation. Even now, with the sword at her throat. She couldn't see me. She only saw the asset that was being taken away. "You should have thought about that," I said. "Before you applauded my humiliation in front of 300 people. I signaled to the waiter. Arthur approached. looking uncomfortable but professional. "The bill, madam?" he asked, holding the leather folder I had ignored earlier. "Separate checks," I said. "I will pay for myself and Mr. Marlowe." I placed my black Centurion card on the tray. "And for the rest of the table?" Arthur asked, looking at the decimated seafood tower and the empty champagne bottle. "They will handle it," I said. "They insisted on the lobster." "But we can't pay," Gordon shouted. "Noelle, the card is maxed out. It will decline. Then you will have to wash dishes," I said. "Or maybe call a friend. Or maybe—" I looked at the black folder on the table. "You can ask your new creditor for a loan, but I warn you, the underwriting process is very strict." I signed the receipt for my portion. I stood up. Jacob gathered the iPad and the black folder. "We are leaving now," I said. "You have 30 days to vacate the house. You have 48 hours to explain the forgery. And Kinsley." I looked at my sister, whose mascara was running down her face in black streaks, making her look like a tragic clown. "You have about 5 minutes before the tow truck leaves. I would run if I were you. You might need to get your ring light out of the trunk." "You are a monster," Ruth screamed. The veneer of the pleading mother vanished, replaced instantly by the vicious woman I knew. "You are cold. You are heartless. I will tell everyone. I will call the news. I will go on Channel 4. I will tell them you stole our home. I will paint you as the ungrateful, greedy witch you are." "Go ahead," I said, pausing at the door. "I will," she shrieked. "I will ruin your reputation. You think you are powerful. The public hates a rich girl who hurts her parents." "Mom," I said, turning back one last time. "You are forgetting one thing." "What?" she hissed. "I own the footage," I said. "Go to the news. Tell them your story. And the moment you do, I will release the video of you laughing while I stood there covered in wine. I will release the audio recording of you planning it in your living room. And I will release the police report for the bank fraud you committed." I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried across the room. "You want a media war? I have the ammunition. You have a seafood tower you can't pay for. Choose wisely." I walked out. We walked through the main dining room. I heard Gordon shouting at the waiter behind us. I heard Kinsley sobbing. I walked out into the cool night air. In the parking lot, the orange lights of a tow truck were flashing. A white Range Rover was being lifted into the air, its alarm blaring into the night. It was a chaotic, noisy, ugly scene. I didn't stop to watch. I got into Jacob's car. "Where to?" he asked. "Home," I said. "I have a business to run, and I think I am finally done cleaning up." As we pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw my family spilling out of the restaurant entrance, arguing with the valet, waving their arms at the tow truck. They looked small. They looked chaotic. They looked like strangers. The dominoes had fallen, and I was the only one left standing. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was exactly 30 days after the dinner at the Harbor Light, and the final hearing for the foreclosure and debt consolidation was underway. My parents had decided to turn the legal proceedings into a spectacle. They had arrived with a freelance reporter from a local tabloid trailing behind them, a man who looked bored but willing to write whatever sob story they fed him. Ruth was wearing a black dress that was visibly frayed at the hem, a calculated wardrobe choice to garner sympathy. She clutched a handkerchief, dabbing at eyes that remained stubbornly dry. Gordon sat hunched over, trying to look like a frail, confused pensioner rather than a man who had bullied his family for decades. And Kinsley was there, of course. She was live streaming from her lap until the bailiff confiscated her phone. Just that morning, Kinsley had uploaded a video titled, "My Billionaire Sister Stole Our Childhood Home." In the video, she cried without tears. I noted about how I was a heartless corporate raider kicking my elderly parents onto the street because of a simple accident at a wedding. The comments section, however, was not going the way she planned. People were asking why she was driving a Range Rover in her previous posts if her parents were destitute. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Harrison entered. He was a stern man with a reputation for hating time wasters. He looked at the mountain of paperwork on his bench. Then he looked at us. "We are here regarding the petition for foreclosure and the counterclaim for intentional infliction of emotional distress." The judge peered over his glasses at my parents' lawyer, a court-appointed public defender who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Yes, Your Honor," the defender said. "My clients argue that the plaintiff, Ms. Ashcroft, purchased these debts maliciously to punish her family." "Malice does not negate a contract," Judge Harrison said dryly. "But let us look at the evidence." Marla Caldwell stood up. She did not look at my parents. She looked only at the bench. "Your Honor," Marla said, her voice clear and precise, "we are submitting Exhibit A. This is an audio recording taken in the defendant's home 2 weeks prior to the wedding. It details a conspiracy to cause public humiliation to my client for the express purpose of viral monetization." The courtroom went silent as the audio played. My father's voice filled the room, booming and arrogant. "Let her stand there in front of all those rich people looking like a mess. She needs to be taken down a peg." Then Kinsley's voice. "The shock value will be insane. Wedding fail of the year." Ruth gasped audibly in the gallery, covering her mouth as if she could catch the words and stuff them back into the speakers. The reporter in the back row stopped scribbling and looked up, his eyebrows raised. "And Exhibit B," Marla continued, "video footage from the event, corroborating the plan." The video played, Kinsley's smirk, the throw, the applause from my parents. Judge Harrison watched it twice. His expression hardened. "This was not an accident," he stated. "This was a staged assault." "And finally," Marla said, dropping the hammer, "Exhibit C, a home equity line of credit agreement signed 8 months ago. We have submitted a forensic handwriting analysis confirming that the signature of the guarantor, my client, is a forgery. We have also submitted passport stamps proving my client was in Switzerland on the date of signing." The judge picked up the document. He examined the signature. He looked at the passport records. Then he looked at Gordon and Ruth. The look was not one of judicial impartialness anymore. It was the look of a man who was seeing a crime. "Mr. Ashcroft," the judge said. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Did you sign your daughter's name to this document?" Gordon stood up, shaking. "Your Honor, it was a misunderstanding. We needed the money for the house. We thought since we are family, Noelle wouldn't mind. She has so much—" "That is an admission of guilt," the judge interrupted. "You just admitted to bank fraud on the record." The courtroom buzzed. My mother started to wail. "We are old. We didn't know." "Ignorance of the law is not a defense for forgery," Judge Harrison snapped. "This is no longer a civil foreclosure matter. I am referring this file to the district attorney's office immediately. You are looking at federal charges for wire fraud and identity theft." He slammed his gavel. "The foreclosure is granted. Title reverts to Tidewater Holdings immediately. The defendants have 24 hours to vacate the premises, and I am issuing a restraining order. If you approach the plaintiff, your bail will be revoked." I stood up. I felt Jacob's hand on my back. I looked across the aisle. My parents were not looking at me with anger anymore. They were looking at me with shock. The reality had finally broken through their delusion. They weren't the victims. They were the criminals. I walked over to them. The bailiff stepped in between us. But I raised a hand. "I gave you every chance," I said, my voice steady. "I gave you money. I gave you silence. I gave you the opportunity to be a family. But you didn't want a daughter. You wanted a prey animal. You chose to be predators, and now you are just prey." We walked out of the courtroom. The reporter chased after us, but not to harass me. He was shouting questions at my father about the fraud charges. The auction for the house happened a week later. It was a formality. Tidewater Holdings was the only bidder. I bought my childhood home for the price of the outstanding debt. The day I got the keys, I drove there alone. The house was empty. They had left it in a state of chaos, trash on the floors, holes in the drywall where pictures had been ripped down. It smelled of stale resentment. I walked through the living room where I had recorded their plan. I walked into the kitchen where I had handed over my crumpled $40 so many times. I stood in the center of the space, waiting to feel sad, but I didn't feel sad. I felt like an architect looking at a renovation project. "What are you going to do with it?" Jacob asked, walking in behind me. "Burn it down." "No," I said. "That is what they would do. They destroy things. I build things." I turned to him. "They spent my whole life mocking me for cleaning. They called me a janitor. They said I smelled like disinfectant. They thought it was an insult." I ran my hand along the wall. "I am going to turn this house into the Marlowe Ashcroft Cleanroom Training Center," I said. "It will be a vocational school. We will teach people who are struggling, people who need a second chance how to work in high-stakes, sterile logistics. We will teach them the skills that built my empire. We will take the profession my family mocked, and we will use it to give people the independence my family tried to steal." 6 months later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony took place. The house was unrecognizable, the dark, oppressive furniture was gone. The walls were painted a crisp, clean white. The garage where the stolen Range Rover used to hide was now a state-of-the-art simulation lab. There were 50 students there, wearing crisp blue uniforms. There were press cameras, real ones this time, covering the philanthropic launch of the year. I stood at the podium, cutting the ribbon. I was wearing a suit that cost $5,000, but I wore it with the same ease I wore my scrubs. Then, I saw her. Kinsley was standing at the edge of the crowd, near the security gate. She looked different. Her hair was unstyled. She was wearing a dress I recognized from 2 years ago. She was holding a bottle of cheap champagne. She tried to push past the security guard. "I am her sister," I heard her shout. "I just want a toast. I brought wine. It is a celebration." She wanted to make a scene. She wanted to spill the wine again. She wanted to hijack the moment one last time, to prove that she still had power over me. But the security guard was one of my drivers. He knew the story. He didn't budge. He simply crossed his arms and blocked her path. "Not today, ma'am," he said. "You are not on the list." I locked eyes with her from the podium. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at her. And then, I turned my back. I turned my back on the drama. I turned my back on the need for their approval. I turned to the students who were waiting for their future to begin. Later that evening, Marla met us in the new office I had built in the master bedroom, my parents' old room, now the center of operations. "The district attorney called," Marla said. "They are ready to offer a plea deal. Your parents are terrified of prison. They are offering full restitution, a public admission of guilt, and they will sign a permanent non-contact order if you advocate for probation instead of jail time." "And Kinsley?" I asked. "She is facing charges for aiding and abetting, plus the vehicle theft," Marla said. "She wants a deal too." I looked out the window at the garden, which was finally being tended to. "They have a choice," I said. "They can sign the agreement. They admit everything. They pay back every cent, even if it takes the rest of their lives. And they never speak my name again. If they refuse, if they have even 1 ounce of pride left, then I let the DA proceed with the maximum sentence." "They will sign," Jacob said. "They have no pride left. You bought that too." He was right. They signed. The dynasty of the Ashcrofts ended not with a bang, but with the scratch of a pen on a plea deal. That night, Jacob and I walked out of the center. The air was cool and sweet, smelling of jasmine and new beginnings. "You know," Jacob said, opening the car door for me, "I was thinking about the dress, the wedding dress. We never did get the stain out." I laughed. It was a genuine, light sound. "I didn't try," I said. "I kept it." "You kept it?" "Yes," I said. "I have it hanging in the back of my closet, wrapped in plastic." "Why?" "Because," I said, looking up at the stars above Savannah. "That stain wasn't a mistake, Jacob. It was the moment I woke up. It was the signal. Without that red wine, I might have spent the rest of my life trying to please people who wanted to consume me." I got into the car. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. It belonged to the future now. The dress isn't ruined, I said as we drove away toward our own home. It is just finished, and so am I. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. Do not forget to subscribe to the Juliet Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and support us by hitting the hype button so this story can reach even more people.